Hello everyone, welcome to Midnight Story Channel. I'm here to help you today. I know many of you listen to these stories to help you drift off to sleep, and I'm honored to be part of your journey. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Take a deep breath, get comfortable, and allow yourself to relax. Your story is about to begin. The sound crept into my consciousness like a thief in the night, a faint, insistent scraping, clawing at the edges of my awareness. It came from the ceiling directly above my bed, a rhythmic grating that seemed to pulse in time with my quickening heartbeat. At first, I tried to dismiss it as the groans of an aging house, perhaps the wind rattling loose shingles or a raccoon skittering across the roof of my secluded Victorian home in Willoridge. But as I lay there, cocooned in the oppressive darkness of my bedroom, eyes wide and unblinking, the noise grew too precise, too purposeful to be anything but deliberate. It wasn't the random clamor of nature. It was the work of something or someone with intent. For weeks, I'd been plagued by odd disturbances in my century-old house, perched on the edge of a quiet, fog-shrouded town. Muffled thumps echoed from the loft above, faint creaks that I'd chalked up to the settling of ancient beams or the whims of an old structure groaning under its own weight. I'd told myself these were the quirks of living alone in a place steeped in history, a house with creaking floorboards and drafty windows that whispered tales of its long-forgotten occupants. But tonight, the sounds were different, sharper, more urgent, as if something had grown impatient. My pulse thundered in my ears as I eased myself upright, the bed springs squeaking traitorously beneath me. The scraping persisted, a relentless clawing that seemed to mock my growing dread. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my fingers trembling so violently I nearly knocked over the glass of water beside it. The screen's cold glow illuminated the room, casting long shadows that danced across the peeling wallpaper. I dialed 911, my breath hitching as I pressed the call button. The scraping stopped abruptly, as if the unseen presence above had sensed my defiance. I froze, phone clutched to my ear, waiting for the operator's voice to pierce the suffocating silence. The house seemed to hold its breath with me, every creak and groan extinguished, leaving only the frantic thudding of my heart. Then just as a faint 911, "What's your emergency?" crackled through the receiver, a deafening crash erupted from the loft. It was followed by rapid, heavy footsteps, each one a hammer blow against the wooden beams above. I whispered frantically into the phone, my voice barely audible over the pounding in my chest. "There's someone in my loft. Please send help now." I rattled off my address, 17 Sycamore Lane, Willoridge, before hanging up, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the device. The footsteps had fallen silent, but faint rustling sounds drifted down, like the soft shuffle of fabric or the cautious movement of someone trying not to be heard. I slid out of bed, my bare feet meeting the icy hardwood floor with a shiver. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to bolt down the stairs and out into the misty night. But the staircase to the ground floor lay directly beneath the loft's trapdoor. To escape, I'd have to pass right under the intruder's domain, a risk I wasn't ready to take. Instead, I crept toward the closet, my eyes darting to the ceiling as if I could see through the plaster and wood to whatever lurked above. My fingers closed around the handle of an old golf club, its cold metal a small comfort in my sweat-slicked palms. I gripped it tightly, my gaze fixed on the shadowed expanse of the ceiling, where the rustling continued, now punctuated by the occasional soft thud. Minutes dragged by, each one an eternity as I stood frozen. The golf club raised like a talisman against the unknown. Where were the police? The distant wail of sirens should have reached me by now, cutting through the fog that clung to Willoridge's quiet streets. But all I heard was my own ragged breathing and the intermittent creaks from above, each sound tightening the knot of fear in my stomach. Then a new noise sliced through the silence, sharp and chilling, a slow, deliberate scraping from the hallway just outside my bedroom. It was the sound of the loft's trap door being eased open, the hinges groaning in protest. My throat constricted, my breath catching as I realized the intruder was descending. I pressed myself against the wall beside my bedroom door, the golf club trembling in my grip. My heart pounded so fiercely I was certain it would betray my position. The hallway floorboards creaked under the weight of cautious, measured steps, each one drawing closer to my door. The intruder paused just outside and I held my breath, every muscle taut with anticipation. The doorknob turned slowly, the faint click echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. The door creaked open, and in the dim moonlight filtering through the window, a shadow stretched across the floor, tall and indistinct as the figure stepped into the room. Instinct took over. I swung the golf club with all my strength, the metal connecting with a sickening thud. A sharp cry of pain shattered the silence as the intruder stumbled backward, clutching their head. Seizing the moment, I darted past them, my bare feet pounding against the floor as I raced down the stairs. The air was thick with the musty scent of old wood and fear as I flung open the front door and spilled out into the chilly night. I didn't stop until I reached my neighbor's porch, banging on their door with frantic desperation. As their porch light flickered on, the distant wail of sirens finally reached my ears, a blessed sound that promised rescue. The next hour passed in a haze of flashing lights and urgent voices. Police officers swarmed my house, their radios crackling as they searched every room, every corner. They found no trace of the intruder, no footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing to suggest anyone had been there at all. They assured me they'd increased patrols in the neighborhood and suggested I stay elsewhere for a few nights. But their words did little to ease the gnawing unease that clung to me. The way the intruder had moved, the precision of their steps, it felt too calculated, too familiar, as if they knew the house as well as I did. Against all reason, I chose to stay. I couldn't explain it, not even to myself, but I needed to understand what had happened, to reclaim the sanctuary of my home. The next morning, I called a locksmith to replace every lock, the sharp clank of new deadbolts, a small reassurance. I installed a security system, its cameras watching every entrance like silent sentinels. Yet even with these precautions, peace eluded me. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside sent my heart racing. I found myself obsessively checking the loft's trap door, its weathered wood now a symbol of the unknown. A week passed without incident, but my unease only deepened. I began to notice subtle disturbances. A book shifted on the shelf, a mug in the sink I didn't recall using. I told myself it was paranoia, the aftershock of that terrifying night. But the feeling of being watched persisted, a constant prickle at the back of my neck. I took to scouring the house, running my hands along walls, tapping floorboards, searching for any clue to how the intruder had entered. It was during one of these fevered inspections that I found it, hidden in the guest room behind a faded tapestry. My fingers brushed against a section of wall that gave slightly, and with a push, a panel swung inward, revealing a narrow, dust-choked passage. My heart thundered as I shone my flashlight into the darkness. The beam illuminated a crude wooden ladder, its rungs worn smooth by unseen hands, leading upward to the loft. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and something sharper, almost metallic. I should have called the police, should have sealed the passage and fled, but a reckless need for answers drove me forward. I took a deep breath, the musty air stinging my lungs, and began to climb. The loft was vast, far larger than I'd imagined, its shadows stretching into corners untouched by my flashlight's beam. Piles of crates and forgotten furniture loomed like silent sentinels, draped in cobwebs that shimmered in the dim light. As I ventured deeper, my beam caught something that turned my stomach, a makeshift encampment tucked behind a stack of moldering trunks. A tattered sleeping bag lay spread across the floor, surrounded by crumpled food wrappers and empty water bottles. A small battery-powered lantern sat atop an overturned box, its weak glow illuminating a pile of books, their pages yellowed and curling. But it was the wall behind this crude camp that stole my breath. It was plastered with photographs, dozens of them, pinned haphazardly with rusted thumbtacks. As I stepped closer, my legs trembling, I realized they were all of me. There I was, stepping out of my car, tending to the roses in my garden, sitting in my living room with a book in hand. Some were taken from outside, through windows veiled by the fog that often blanketed Willowridge. Others, chillingly, could only have been captured from inside the house. Angles that suggested the photographer had stood mere feet from me, unseen. My breath caught in my throat as the truth crashed over me. Someone had been living here, watching me for months. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling, the flashlight shaking in my grip. I had to leave, had to call the police. But as I turned, my beam caught a small weathered door built into the low wall of the loft. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of faint, unnatural light spilling through the gap. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to flee this house and never look back. But a perverse compulsion drew me forward. I had to know. I pushed the door open, the hinges creaking like a warning, and stepped into a cramped space no larger than a closet. The walls were scrawled with frantic, overlapping writing, gibberish phrases and rambling paragraphs that seemed to pulse with a manic energy. In the center stood a small table, and on it, a laptop, its screen glowing with an eerie, pale light. My eyes were drawn to an open document, the words stark against the white background. As I read, the world tilted beneath me. Day 162. She nearly found me tonight. I was careless. Too loud, but it's all right. She's not ready yet. Soon, though. Soon she'll see why I'm here, why I've watched her all this time. She's the one, the only one who can decipher the code, who can save us. She just doesn't know it yet. Tears blurred my vision as the words sank in. This stranger, this phantom in my home, had been spying on me for over 5 months, convinced I held the key to some delusional salvation. A noise behind me, a soft shuffle of footsteps, snapped me out of my daze. I spun around, heart in my throat, to find a figure blocking the entrance to the tiny room. In the dim light, I could make out matted hair, wild and unkempt, and eyes that gleamed with a feverish intensity. Their clothes hung loosely, reeking of sweat and neglect. You weren't meant to see this yet, they rasped, their voice rough, as if unused to speaking. But maybe it's time. Maybe you're ready to understand. I backed away, my back pressing against the table, the laptop's glow casting eerie shadows across the scrawled walls. Who are you? I demanded, my voice trembling. What do you want from me? They took a step closer, the stench of their unwashed body filling the small space. I'm here to save you, they said, their tone fervent, almost reverent. To save us all. You're the key, don't you see? Your work, your mind. It's the answer we've been searching for. My mind raced. My work? I was a freelance data analyst, crunching numbers for small tech startups. How could that be the answer to anything? You're mistaken, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm nobody special. Just let me go. Their face softened, a disturbing smile curling their lips. You're scared, confused, I understand. But soon you'll see. Soon you'll know why I had to watch you, to learn everything about you. I scanned the room desperately, searching for an escape, but the stranger blocked the only exit. My eyes fell on a small remote control on the table beside the laptop, its buttons glinting in the dim light. Without thinking, I snatched it and pointed it at them, my hand shaking. "Stay back!" I shouted, hoping the threat would startle them. To my shock, their eyes widened in genuine fear. "No!" they cried, lunging forward. "Don't press that! You'll ruin everything!" In my panic, my finger slipped, pressing a button. A piercing wail filled the air, the security system's alarm blaring through the house. The stranger howled in frustration, their hands clawing at their ears as they staggered toward me. I ducked under their arm, scrambling through the loft, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly. I stumbled down the hidden passage, the ladder creaking under my weight, and burst into the hallway. The stranger's footsteps thundered behind me, their shouts lost in the alarm's relentless scream. I didn't look back. I ran through the house, out the front door, and into the street, the fog swirling around me like a living thing. The alarm's wail echoed in the night, mingling with the approaching wail of police sirens. I stood there trembling, gasping for breath, as the reality of what had happened sank in. My quiet life in Willowridge, my sanctuary, had been shattered. The safety I'd taken for granted was gone, replaced by the chilling truth that sometimes the monsters aren't lurking in the shadows or under the bed. Sometimes they're right above you, watching, waiting, hidden in the very walls of your home. The night was a canvas of ink, pierced only by the feeble glow of our car's headlights as they struggled against the relentless downpour. Rain hammered the windshield, the wipers thrashing in a futile battle to clear the deluge. Then, with a sharp, explosive pop, the world tilted. The car lurched violently, skidding across the slick pavement of Hollow Road, a desolate stretch cutting through the endless pine forests of Blackthorn County. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles blanching, as we careened onto the gravel shoulder, the vehicle shuddering to a stop. The engine sputtered its final breath, leaving only the rhythmic drumming of rain and the ragged cadence of our breathing. "Are we okay?" I asked, my voice tight as I turned to my wife, Clara, in the passenger seat. Her face was pale in the dim glow of the dashboard, but she nodded, her hands clutching the seatbelt. In the back, our daughter Lily sat wide-eyed, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her small frame trembling but unharmed. I stepped out into the storm, the cold rain soaking through my jacket in seconds. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine, the silence unnerving in its totality. No crickets, no distant hum of traffic, just the oppressive weight of the night. I inspected the tire, its rubber shredded to ribbons, and a sinking feeling settled in my gut. We were miles from the last hamlet we'd passed, speck of a town called Dunmore, and who knew how far from the next. My phone confirmed my fears. No signal, the screen's glow mocking our isolation. "Looks like we're stuck for now," I said, sliding back into the driver's seat, water dripping from my hair. "I'll swap the tire, but we should wait for daylight to find help." Clara's eyes darted to the darkness beyond the windows. "I don't like this. David, this place, it feels wrong." I understood her unease. Hollow Road was a forgotten artery, winding through dense forests that seemed to swallow sound and light. But I forced a reassuring smile. "It's just a storm. We've got snacks, water, blankets. We'll hunker down and head out at dawn." As I began the laborious task of changing the tire, the familiar routine grounded me. The clank of the jack and the heft of the spare, a small anchor in the chaos. The flashlight's beam carved a narrow path through the night, but beyond its reach the forest loomed, its shadows thick and impenetrable. I was tightening the lug nuts when I saw it, a faint glimmer in the distance, twin pinpoints of light piercing the rain. Headlights. Relief surged through me. Another vehicle meant help, a chance to get back on track. But as the lights drew closer, that relief curdled into apprehension. They moved too slowly, too deliberately, and something about them was off. Too wide set, too high off the ground for a standard car. The vehicle stopped about 50 yards behind us, its headlights blazing like the eyes of some predatory beast. In the rearview mirror, I could just make out the silhouette of a hulking truck, its engine idling with a low, menacing growl. Clara's voice trembled. "David, what's happening?" "Probably just someone checking on us," I said, trying to keep my tone steady for her and Lily's sake. "I'll see what they want." I stepped out, the rain stinging my face, and raised a hand in a tentative wave. "Hello, we could use some help if you've got a minute." My voice sounded thin, swallowed by the storm. No response came. No figure emerged from the truck. The headlights remained fixed, unyielding, pinning me in their glare. Unease twisted into dread. I was about to retreat to the car when I heard it. The faint creak of a door opening, followed by the crunch of boots on gravel. But the space between the headlights remained empty, as if the driver had melted into the night. "Who's there?" I called, my voice cracking. The footsteps grew louder, purposeful, moving toward me, yet no one appeared. Panic clawed at my chest. I bolted back to the car, slamming the door behind me. "We need to go. Now." "But the tire," Clara began. "No time." I jammed the key into the ignition, praying the engine would cooperate. It coughed once, twice, then roared to life. I threw the car into gear, the spare tire wobbling precariously as we peeled away. In the rearview mirror, the truck's headlights swung around, following us with predatory intent. "Dad, what's going on?" Lily's voice was small, trembling from the back seat. "It's okay, sweetheart," I lied, pushing the car to its limits. "Just a little adventure." The truck gained on us, its massive form filling the mirror, the rain-slicked road making every turn a gamble. Suddenly, another set of headlights appeared ahead, identical to the first, blocking our path. Another truck, boxing us in. My heart sank as I scanned for an escape. To the right, a narrow dirt track branched off into the forest, barely visible through the downpour. With no other choice, I wrenched the wheel, sending us jolting down the rutted path, branches scraping the car's sides like skeletal fingers. The trucks followed, their engines roaring over the uneven terrain. The chase felt like a nightmare, the forest closing in around us, the road narrowing until it ended abruptly at the edge of a steep ravine. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop inches from the drop. The trucks pulled up behind us, their headlights blinding, trapping us against the abyss. "David, what do we do?" Clara whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding rain. I had no answer. The truck's headlights snapped off, plunging us into darkness. In the sudden silence, I heard doors opening, footsteps circling the car. "Lock the door," I said, knowing it was futile. Whatever was out there, locked doors wouldn't stop them. Shapes moved in the moonlight, human-like but wrong, too fluid, too precise in their movements. A tap on my window made me jump. I turned to see a face, or the absence of one, smooth, featureless, like a mannequin's head, with dark, empty sockets where eyes should have been. Clara stifled a scream as similar figures pressed against every window, their eyeless gazes boring into us. One reached for the door handle. I braced myself, ready to fight, but the door didn't open. Instead, a high-pitched whine filled the car, a sound that seared my nerves and blurred my vision. Clara and Lily slumped in their seats, unconscious, their breathing shallow. I fought the encroaching darkness, my hands clawing at the steering wheel, but it was no use. As my eyes closed, the last thing I saw was those blank, impassive faces watching us succumb. I woke with a gasp, sunlight streaming through the car windows. We were parked on the side of Hollow Road, the spare tire properly attached, the rain a distant memory. Clara and Lily stirred beside me, blinking in confusion. What? What happened? Clara asked, rubbing her temples. I'm not sure, I said, my voice hoarse. Must have pulled over to rest, tired from the drive. But the words felt hollow. The chase, the ravine, those faceless figures. It had been too vivid, too real to be a dream. Yet here we were, safe, the highway stretching out before us, no sign of trucks or dirt tracks. We drove on in silence, the memory of the night lingering like a shadow. As we passed a faded sign for Dunmore, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a truck looming behind us. There was nothing, just the empty road, bathed in morning light. But the unease remained, a silent vow forming in my mind. No more night drives, no more lonely roads. From now on, we'd stick to bustling highways, to places where the darkness couldn't hide its secrets. Because now we knew. Out there, in the forgotten corners of the world, something watches. And not all that lurks in the night is content to simply pass by. The forest was a cathedral of silence, its towering pines swallowing every sound, as if the very air held its breath. I'd been hiking for hours through the rugged trails of Eldermore, a sprawling wilderness reserve on the fringes of Thornvale, my boots crunching over a carpet of fallen needles and brittle twigs. The autumn sun, once a warm companion, now dipped low, casting long, skeletal shadows that seemed to claw at the earth. I checked my phone for the umpteenth time. The screen's glow a harsh rebuke. No signal, and the GPS had given up an hour ago, leaving me with only a vague sense of direction and a growing knot of unease. The trail markers, once plentiful, had vanished, and the forest beauty had morphed into something oppressive, its silence not peaceful but predatory. My name is Emma, a graphic designer by trade, but on weekends I traded city lights for the solitude of the wild. Eldermore had promised pristine vistas and challenging paths, a perfect escape from the clamor of Thornvale's bustling streets. But now, as twilight bled into the sky, I realized I was lost, utterly, hopelessly lost. I should have turned back when the trail began to fade, retraced my steps to the safety of the ranger station. Yet something, stubborn pride perhaps, or a reckless curiosity, had urged me onward, deeper into the labyrinth of trees. That decision, I would soon learn, was a grave mistake. As the last rays of sunlight dwindled, a flicker of light caught my eye through the dense undergrowth. A warm, golden glow, like a beacon in the gathering dusk. Hope surged within me. A ranger outpost, perhaps, or a campsite with fellow hikers who could point me toward civilization. I quickened my pace, pushing through thorny brambles that snagged at my jacket, their barbs drawing pinpricks of blood. The light grew stronger, guiding me to a clearing where a cluster of ramshackle buildings stood, their weathered timbers sagging under the weight of time. Smoke curled lazily from crooked chimneys, and the faint murmur of voices drifted on the evening breeze, carrying the promise of safety. Relief washed over me as I stepped into the clearing, waving to draw attention. "Hello," I called, my voice trembling with exhaustion. The response was immediate and chilling. The voices fell silent, as if severed by an unseen blade. Curtains twitched in grimy windows, and pale faces peered out, their eyes glinting with a wary intensity. A door creaked open, and a man emerged onto a sagging porch, his gaunt frame clad in faded overalls. His face was etched with deep lines, his dark eyes sunken beneath a heavy brow, studying me with a scrutiny that made my skin prickle. "Good evening," I said, forcing a smile to mask my unease. "I'm sorry to intrude, but I've lost my way on the trails. Could you help me find the main road?" The man didn't answer immediately, his gaze raking over me from head to toe, as if weighing my worth. When he spoke, his voice was rough, like gravel grinding underfoot. "No roads round here, stranger. This is Briar Hollow. We don't see many wanderers. His words carried a weight that chilled me. The word wanderers laced with a disdain that felt almost tangible. I shifted uneasily, the forest silence pressing in from all sides. I didn't mean to trespass, I said, striving to keep my tone steady. If you could just point me toward the nearest town, I'll be on my way. His frown deepened, his eyes narrowing. Nearest town's a long trek. Night's falling fast, and these woods ain't safe after dark. As if on cue, a low, guttural howl echoed through the trees, a sound that didn't belong to any wolf or coyote I'd ever heard. It was raw, hungry, and it sent a shiver racing down my spine. The man seemed to reach a decision, his expression softening, though his eyes remained guarded. Reckon you'd best come inside. We'll sort you out, come morning. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to turn and flee back into the forest, but the rational part of my mind knew that would be suicide. I was lost. The night was closing in, and the howl still lingered in my ears, a reminder of the dangers lurking beyond the clearing. Reluctantly, I nodded and followed him toward the largest of the buildings, its warped door groaning as it swung open. As we walked, more figures emerged from the other houses, men, women, and children, their faces pale and gaunt, their eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Children clung to their parents' legs, staring at me with unblinking gazes that felt far too old for their years. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and something sweeter, almost cloying, that I couldn't place. The room was lit by flickering oil lamps, their light casting jagged shadows across walls papered in faded, floral patterns. The furniture was ancient, its upholstery frayed and sagging, as if it had borne witness to generations of secrets. The man gestured to a worn wooden table. "Name's Gideon," he said, his tone gruff. "This here's my wife, Esther." A thin woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun, nodded from near a massive stone fireplace, her hands stirring a pot that hung over the flames. Her eyes never left me, sharp and unyielding, as if peeling back my layers to see what lay beneath. "I'm Emma," I said, forcing another smile. "Thank you for your kindness." Gideon grunted, settling into a chair across from me. "You'll stay the night. Come dawn, we'll see about getting you back where you belong." The words were meant to reassure, but they landed like a warning. Esther ladled a steaming portion of stew into a chip bowl and set it before me, the rich, savory aroma making my stomach growl. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and the hunger was a gnawing ache. I took a cautious bite, surprised by the complex flavors, herbs I couldn't name, a faint sweetness that lingered on my tongue. "What's in this?" I asked, more to break the oppressive silence than out of genuine curiosity. Gideon's eyes flicked to mine, his expression unreadable. "Best not to ask questions you ain't ready for the answers to," he said, his tone final. I swallowed hard, the stew suddenly heavy in my stomach. As I ate, the wrongness of Briar Hollow settled over me like a fog. Gideon and Esther's watchful gazes, the unnatural quiet outside, the strange, sweet scent that clung to the air. It all wove a tapestry of unease that made my skin crawl. After dinner, Esther led me upstairs to a small room, its lumpy mattress covered in musty blankets. "Rest well," she said, her voice flat, before closing the door with a soft click that felt like a lock snapping shut. I lay down fully clothed, the bed creaking beneath me, and tried to sleep. But the house's creaks and groans kept me on edge, each sound a reminder of my vulnerability. I must have dozed off because I woke with a start, disoriented in the pitch-black room. A murmur of voices drifted up from below. Low, urgent, their words indistinct but laced with a tension that set my nerves alight. I crept to the window, careful to avoid the creaking floorboards, and peered out into the moonlit clearing. A group of figures stood in a circle, draped in long, hooded robes that seemed to absorb the light. In the center was Gideon, his arms raised, chanting in a language that twisted in my ears, unfamiliar and guttural. My heart pounded as I watched the ritual unfold, the air thick with an unnatural energy that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. What had I stumbled into? A cult? Something worse? Suddenly, one of the robed figures looked up, their hood slipping just enough to reveal a pale, gaunt face. Their eyes locked onto my window, and I ducked down, my breath hitching. I waited, heart thundering, praying they hadn't seen me. When I dared to look again, the clearing was empty. The ritual dissolved into the night. Sleep was impossible after that. I lay in bed, every creak of the house a threat, every shadow a potential pursuer. As the first light of dawn crept through the grimy window, I made my decision. I had to leave now, before Briar Hollow claimed me as its own. I eased the door open, wincing at every squeak, and crept down the stairs, my backpack slung over one shoulder. I was inches from the front door when a voice stopped me cold. "Leaving so soon, Emma?" I turned slowly to find Gideon at the foot of the stairs, his eyes glittering in the dim light. "I thought I'd get an early start," I stammered, my hand inching toward the door handle. "Thank you for your hospitality." He took a step closer, his presence looming. "Ain't polite to slip out without a farewell, especially when you've seen things you oughtn't." My blood ran cold. "I didn't see anything," I lied, my voice shaking. "I just want to go home." He shook his head, a slow, deliberate motion. "That ain't possible now. Briar Hollow has ways of handling outsiders who learn our truths." I didn't wait to hear more. I yanked the door open and sprinted into the clearing, my boots pounding the dirt as I plunged into the forest. Behind me, shouts erupted, followed by the sound of pursuit, branches snapping, footsteps thundering. The strange howl from the previous night echoed through the trees, closer now, filled with a ravenous hunger that spurred me onward. I ran blindly, branches lashing my face, roots threatening to trip me with every step. The forest seemed alive, its shadows twisting to slow me, its silence mocking my desperation. I don't know how long I ran, my lungs burning, my legs screaming for respite. The sounds of pursuit faded, but I didn't slow, driven by the certainty that something still hunted me, something that didn't need to run to catch its prey. Just when I thought I could go no further, I burst onto a paved road, the asphalt a jarring contrast to the forest chaos. A car approached, its headlights cutting through the early morning mist. I waved frantically, heedless of how wild I must have looked. The car screeched to a halt, and an elderly couple peered out, concern etched on their faces. "Are you all right, dear?" the woman asked, taking in my torn clothes and scratched arms. I glanced back at the forest, half expecting to see robed figures emerging from the trees. But there was nothing, just the endless expanse of pines, their shadows hiding whatever secrets Briar Hollow held. "Please," I gasped, "I need a ride to the nearest town." They hesitated only a moment before nodding, and I scrambled into the back seat, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. As we drove away, I kept my eyes on the receding tree line, the forest silence a weight that pressed against my chest. I never reported what happened in Briar Hollow. Who would believe such a tale? But sometimes in the dead of night, I hear that unearthly howl in my dreams, and I wake in a cold sweat, grateful for the hum of Thornvale's city lights outside my window. I know the truth now. Deep in the heart of Eldermore, where no roads lead, Briar Hollow waits, its secrets guarded by those who dwell in its shadows. And I pray no other lost hiker ever stumbles upon its gilded lights, for what lies within is a mystery best left undisturbed. The laboratory was a crypt of flickering shadows at 2:17 a.m. its sterile silence broken only by the soft hum of machinery and the occasional drip of a faucet. The overhead fluorescents buzzed weakly, casting a sickly pallor over the cluttered workstations, their surfaces strewn with monitors, circuit boards, and half-empty coffee mugs. I, Nora Caldwell, a graduate student at Cresthaven University's Quantum Research Institute, had made this subterranean lab my second home. For weeks, I'd burned the midnight oil, poring over algorithms and running simulations for my dissertation on quantum cryptography, a project that promised to redefine data security. The lab's familiar sense of ozone and antiseptic were oddly comforting, a tether to reality amid the chaos of my research. But tonight, that comfort shattered like glass under the weight of approaching footsteps, deliberate and unhurried, echoing down the tiled corridor. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, the glow of my monitor painting my face in ghostly blues. The footsteps grew louder, each one a measured strike against the polished floor, too purposeful for a janitor or a stray colleague. My breath caught in my throat, my pulse a frantic drumbeat as I stared at the lab's reinforced steel door. I was supposed to be alone, had been for hours. The rest of the institute long since deserted. The realization that I wasn't sent a chill racing down my spine, rooting me to my chair. The door swung open with a soft hiss, revealing a figure I recognized but hadn't expected. Dr. Victor Langston, a senior researcher, an occasional collaborator with my advisor, Dr. Patel. His angular face broke into a smile that felt too bright, too rehearsed for the witching hour. "Nora, my dear," he said, his voice smooth as polished marble, "I had a hunch I'd find you burning the candle at both ends." I forced a smile, my unease masked by years of practiced politeness. "Dr. Langston, I didn't expect anyone else here so late. Just wrapping up some simulations." He stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind him with a finality that made my stomach lurch. His graying hair caught the fluorescent light, and his eyes, usually hidden behind wire-rimmed glasses, glinted with an intensity that set my nerves on edge. "Oh, you know how it is," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "The best breakthroughs come when the world's asleep. I thought I'd check on our star pupil." I nodded, turning back to my screen in a silent plea for him to leave. The data sprawled across the monitor, complex strings of quantum key distributions, felt like an exposed nerve, vulnerable under his gaze. But instead of retreating, Langston moved closer, his shadow falling over my shoulder as he leaned in to study the display. His breath was warm against my neck, carrying the faint tang of stale coffee. "Fascinating work you're doing here," he murmured, his voice low, almost intimate. "Remind me, what's the crux of your research?" I shifted in my chair, putting distance between us, my fingers tightening on the mouse. "It's a novel approach to quantum encryption," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Using entangled particles to create codes that are theoretically unbreakable. Still in the early stages, though. Lots of kinks to iron out." His eyes lit up, a predatory gleam that made my skin crawl. "Unbreakable codes," he repeated, savoring the words. "That's a game changer, Nora. Truly revolutionary." The enthusiasm in his voice didn't match the hunger in his eyes, and alarm bells began to clang in my head. Dr. Langston had always been professional, if distant, in our interactions, offering curt feedback during seminars or nodding politely in the halls. This sudden, fervent interest felt wrong, like a mask slipping to reveal something darker beneath. "It's promising, but not there yet," I said, minimizing the window on my screen with a quick keystroke. "Just laying the groundwork for now." He chuckled, a low rumbling sound that raised the hairs on my arms. "Oh, don't be so modest. Even foundational work like this could be immensely valuable to the right people." The implication hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. My heart began to race, a cold sweat prickling my skin. Was he suggesting what I thought he was? I stood abruptly, needing space, my chair scraping against the floor. It's getting late, I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. I should head home. Long day tomorrow. Langston didn't move, his eyes locking onto mine with a scrutiny that felt like a physical weight. Before you go, he said, his tone shifting to something harder, I'd love to take a closer look at your data. I could offer some seasoned insights. My instincts screamed at me to run, to grab my bag and bolt for the exit, but I hesitated. Langston was a respected figure in the department, a colleague of my advisor. Refusing him outright could jeopardize my standing, my funding, my entire academic career. Yet every fiber of my being warned that this was no innocent offer. I appreciate that, I said carefully, my mouth dry. But I'm not comfortable sharing raw data yet. You know how it is, research integrity, peer review, all that. For a moment, his smile faltered, revealing a flash of something cold and calculating. Come now, Nora, he said, stepping closer, his voice smooth but edged with steel. We're all colleagues here. Sharing knowledge is the lifeblood of academia, isn't it? I took a step back, my hip brushing against the lab bench, the cold metal grounding me. Of course, I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts. But this is my dissertation. I need to keep it under wraps until it's ready for publication. His smile returned, but it was a predator's grin, devoid of warmth. I understand, but a young researcher like you could benefit from additional support, academic, financial, professional, opportunities that could elevate your work to new heights. The words were a velvet glove over a clenched fist, the subtext clear. He wasn't asking, he was demanding. My mouth went dry as the full scope of his intentions crystallized. This wasn't about collaboration or mentorship. Dr. Langston was trying to steal my research, to claim the fruits of my sleepless nights and relentless calculations for himself, or worse, to sell it to someone else. I'm doing fine on my own, I said, my voice steadier now, fueled by a spark of anger. Dr. Patel and I have everything under control. His expression hardened, the pretense of friendliness evaporating. Your advisor is a fine scholar, but she doesn't grasp the true potential of your work. There are others who do, people who would pay handsomely for a glimpse at what you've created. The admission was brazen, stripped of all subtlety. My anger flared, cutting through the fog of fear. He was openly admitting his intent to exploit my research, to turn my life's work into a commodity. I glanced at the emergency exit, its red glow tantalizingly close, but triggering the alarm would draw security and questions I wasn't ready to answer. My phone was in my bag, out of reach behind Langston's imposing frame. I was trapped, cornered in the very space where I felt most in control. I'm not interested, I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. Now please let me leave. Langston took a step closer, looming over me, his presence suffocating. I'm afraid that's not an option, Nora. Not until we reach an understanding. My heart pounded. A caged animal, desperate for escape. The lab bench pressed against my back, its surface cluttered with beakers and tools. As my hand brushed against a glass container of distilled water, an idea sparked. In one fluid motion, I grabbed the beaker and flung its contents into Langston's face. He staggered back, sputtering and clawing at his eyes, the water dripping harmlessly but startlingly cold. Seizing the moment, I darted around him, snatching my bag from the chair as I sprinted for the door. "You'll regret this," he roared, his voice thick with rage. But I was already in the corridor, my sneakers pounding against the tiles. I didn't stop until I reached my car in the Institute's deserted parking lot, my hands shaking so violently I could barely fit the key into the ignition. As I peeled out, the rear-view mirror caught a glimpse of Langston emerging from the building, his face contorted with fury, his glasses glinting in the sodium lights. The next few days were a haze of paranoia and dread. I avoided the lab, Working from my cramped apartment, jumping at every creak of the floorboards or hum of the refrigerator. The thought of confronting Langston again, or reporting him, filled me with a nauseating mix of fear and doubt. What if no one believed me? What if he spun the story, painting me as the unstable one? My dissertation, my future, hung in the balance, and the weight of it threatened to crush me. But as the initial shock faded, anger took root, a fierce resolve to protect what was mine. This was my work, the product of countless hours and sleepless nights. I wouldn't let it be stolen, not by Langston or anyone else. I scheduled a meeting with Dr. Patel, my advisor, my palms sweating as I sat in her cluttered office. The scent of old books and jasmine tea a small comfort. Haltingly, I recounted the encounter, every word a gamble. To my immense relief, she believed me, her usually serene demeanor replaced by a fiery indignation. "This is outrageous," she said, her voice sharp. "We're taking this to the dean immediately." What followed was a whirlwind of meetings, investigations, intense confrontations. Langston denied everything at first, his polished demeanor unshaken. But security footage from the lab that night, grainy but damning, corroborated my story. Faced with the evidence, he crumbled, his confession unraveling a sordid history. I wasn't his first target. Other students and researchers came forward, their own tales of coercion and attempted theft painting a portrait of a man who preyed on ambition and vulnerability. The scandal rocked the institute, leading to Langston's dismissal and a sweeping overhaul of research security protocols. For me, the aftermath was a crucible. I threw myself back into my work with a renewed ferocity. The lab once again my sanctuary, though now tinged with caution. The experience had shaken me, but it had also clarified the value of my research. If someone like Langston was willing to go to such lengths to steal it, then it was worth protecting, worth pursuing to its fullest potential. Months later, as I stood at the podium presenting my completed dissertation to a packed auditorium, a sense of triumph coursed through me, not just for the academic milestone, but for the battle I'd fought and won. The applause was sweet, but the true victory was knowing that this work was mine, forged through perseverance and defiance. As I left the auditorium, Dr. Patel caught up with me, a proud smile lighting her face. "Exceptional work, Nora," she said. "We've had inquiries about your encryption method, legitimate ones, of course. The possibilities are exciting." I grinned, a mix of pride and vindication warming my chest. "That's incredible. I can't wait to see where it leads." As we stepped into the crisp Cresthaven afternoon, sunlight glinting off the Institute's glass facade, I felt a surge of optimism. The path ahead would be challenging, fraught with obstacles I could only imagine, but I knew now that I had the strength to face them. Langston's betrayal had taught me a hard truth. In the world of cutting-edge research, knowledge is power, and protecting that knowledge is as vital as creating it. With my dissertation in hand and the future stretching before me, I was ready to meet whatever came next, armed with the certainty that some truths are worth fighting for. The rain came down in relentless sheets, transforming Mistmore Lane into a shimmering river of reflected headlights. My old sedan's wipers thrashed against the deluge, their frantic rhythm barely keeping pace with the storm. The road, a lonely ribbon cutting through the fog-draped hills of Greystone Hollow, stretched endlessly before me, its edges blurred by the downpour. I, Ethan Harper, was on my way home from a late shift at the Greystone Credit Union, my eyes heavy with fatigue, and my mind dulled by the monotony of ledgers and loan applications. The night was a cocoon of sound, the roar of rain, the hum of the engine, until a lone figure emerged from the gloom, standing on the shoulder with a thumb raised, drenched and forlorn. I don't make a habit of picking up hitchhikers. The world's too unpredictable. too full of stories that end in regret. But there was something about this man, his shoulders hunched against the storm, his silhouette softened by the rain that tugged at my conscience. He looked like a lost soul, abandoned by the world, and the thought of leaving him to the mercy of the night felt like a betrayal of some unspoken code. Against my better judgment, I eased the car to a stop, the tires splashing through puddles that mirrored the stormy sky. The man jogged over, his face obscured by the hood of a dark, waterlogged jacket. He opened the passenger door, letting in a gust of wind and a spray of rain, and slid inside, bringing with him the sharp scent of wet wool and earth. "Thanks," he said, his voice rough but warm, like a fire struggling to catch. "Didn't think anyone would stop in this mess." I nodded, my hands tightening on the wheel as I pulled back onto the road. "No problem." "Where you headed?" "Just down the way," he replied, his answer vague, settling into the seat with a sigh. "Wherever you're going works." I stole a glance at him, catching a glimpse of a weathered face beneath the hood. Deep lines etched into his skin, a scruffy beard flecked with gray, and eyes that held a quiet gratitude. His clothes were worn but clean, and despite the storm, he didn't carry the air of menace I'd half expected. Still, a prickle of unease lingered, a whisper that I'd invited something unknown into my car. We drove in silence, the rain's steady drumbeat filling the void, the headlights carving a tunnel through the fog. I was just beginning to relax, my grip on the wheel loosening, when he spoke again, his voice cutting through the night like a blade. "So, Ethan, how long have you been in Greystone Hollow?" My body stiffened, my foot easing off the gas. I hadn't told him my name, hadn't mentioned where I lived. The air in the car seemed to thicken, the rain's rhythm now a heartbeat echoing my own. "How do you know my name?" I asked, striving to keep my voice steady, though it wavered like a candle in the wind. He chuckled, a low, gravelly sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Oh, I know plenty about you, Ethan. I know you work at the credit union on Willow Street. I know you've got a border collie named Scout who's probably waiting for you at home. And I know your fiancée, Laura, is wondering why you're running late tonight." My mind reeled, a kaleidoscope of questions and fears. How could he know these things? Greystone Hollow was small, sure, but not so small that strangers knew your dog's name or your fiancé's habits. I'd never seen this man before. Not in the credit union, not at the local diner, not anywhere. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice sharper now, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. He turned to face me, and in the dim glow of the dashboard, his eyes seemed to burn with an unsettling intensity, like coals smoldering beneath ash. "Just a traveler," he said, his tone calm but weighted. "I make it my business to know things about people. You'd be surprised what you can learn if you just pay attention." I swallowed hard, my throat dry as dust. The urge to slam on the brakes, to demand he get out, was overwhelming, but we were miles from anywhere. The rain a curtain that hid the world. Something in his demeanor, a quiet confidence, a hint of something unnameable, told me he wouldn't leave easily. "What do you want?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice, the way it betrayed my fear. He smiled, a gesture that didn't reach his eyes, his teeth catching the faint light. "Want? I'm just making conversation, Ethan. Isn't that what folks do on a long, wet drive?" I didn't answer, my mind racing through possibilities. Was he a stalker? Someone who'd been watching me, piecing together my life like a puzzle? A con artist, setting me up for some elaborate scam? The storm outside seemed to mirror the chaos within, the rain pounding harder, the fog thickening until the road was a mere suggestion. He spoke again, his voice soft but piercing. "You're wondering how I know so much. It's simpler than you think. That name tag on your shirt, you forgot to take it off after work. The dog hair on your jeans points to a big breed, and that I heart my border collie sticker on your bumper was a dead giveaway. As for Laura, you've been glancing at your phone every chance you get. Doesn't take a genius to figure someone's waiting for you? His explanation was logical, almost disarmingly so, but it did little to quell the dread coiling in my gut. It was too neat, too practiced, and it didn't explain the intimacy of his knowledge, the way he spoke as if he'd peered into my soul. That doesn't cover how you knew where I live, I said, my eyes flicking between the road and his shadowed form. He shrugged, the movement casual but deliberate. Greystone Credit Union isn't exactly a national chain. Took an educated guess based on your uniform. I wanted to believe him, to chalk it up to coincidence and clever deduction, but the knot in my stomach tightened. The road ahead curved, and I spotted the faint glow of a gas station up ahead, its neon sign a beacon in the storm. Look, I said, my voice firm, I think this is far enough. I'll drop you off at the station. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Ethan, he interrupted, his tone hardening, no longer the amiable traveler. We're not done talking. Anger flared, cutting through my fear like a blade. This is my car, I snapped. I decide when the ride's over. He laughed, a sound devoid of warmth, sharp as broken glass. Oh, Ethan, you lost that control the moment you let me in. But don't worry, I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to talk about choices. My mouth went dry, the word choices hanging in the air like a storm cloud. What choices? I asked, though part of me dreaded the answer. The decisions we make, he said, leaning back, his voice taking on a reflective tone. The consequences that follow. Take, for instance, your decision to siphon funds from the credit union. Small amounts, nothing obvious at first glance, but they add up, don't they? The world seemed to tilt, the road blurring before me. My blood ran cold, the air in the car suddenly stifling. There was no way he could know about that. I'd been meticulous, covering my tracks with forged entries, ensuring the books balanced perfectly. It was a desperate act, born of mounting debts and Laura's medical bills, a secret I'd buried deep. I don't know what you're talking about, I lied, my voice a hollow echo. He turned to me, his eyes boring into mine, unyielding. Don't play dumb, Ethan. We both know the truth. The question is, what are you going to do about it? My hands trembled on the wheel, my mind a whirlwind of panic. Are you blackmailing me? Is that what this is? He shook his head, his expression almost pitying. Blackmail's such a crude word. I prefer to think of this as an opportunity, a chance to right your wrongs before it's too late. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, though I feared I already knew. The credit union scheduled an audit next week, he said, his tone casual, as if discussing the weather. They'll find the discrepancies, and when they do, your life in Greystone Hollow, your job, your home, Laura, it'll all come crashing down. Unless he let the word hang, a lifeline dangled before a drowning man. I knew I shouldn't bite, shouldn't engage with this stranger who knew too much, but desperation clawed at me. Unless what? I asked, hating myself for it. Unless you come clean, he said simply. Go to your boss tomorrow morning. Confess everything. Pay back what you took. It won't be easy. There'll be consequences, but it's better than waiting for the audit to expose you. I laughed, a bitter, jagged sound. Why would I do that? Why should I trust a word you say? He sighed, reaching into his jacket. I tensed, half expecting a weapon, but he produced a small, leather-bound notebook, its edges worn and stained. Because I have proof, he said, flipping it open to reveal pages filled with neat, precise handwriting. Dates, amounts, account numbers, a damning ledger of my crimes. everything they'd need to bury you. I'm giving you a chance. Ethan, one you don't deserve, but one I'm offering all the same. My mind reeled, questions colliding like storm clouds. How had he gotten this? Who was he really? But even as I grasped for answers, I knew he was right. The audit would uncover everything. And if I didn't act first, I'd lose far more than my job. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice raw. Why do you care what happens to me? He was silent for a long moment, staring out at the rain-slicked road, his face unreadable. When he spoke, his voice was softer, tinged with something like regret. Let's just say I've walked your path, Ethan. Made the same mistakes. Thought I could outsmart the system. I learned the hard way that there's always a reckoning. I'm trying to spare you that pain. The words settled over me like a heavy fog, their weight pressing against my chest. We drove in silence, the gas station's glow fading behind us, the road stretching into the heart of Greystone Hollow. As the town's lights appeared on the horizon, I knew I faced a crossroads, not just on Mistmore Lane, but in my life. The diner up ahead, its neon sign flickering through the rain, marked the end of this strange encounter. I'll drop you here, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. At the diner, he nodded, gathering his things, the notebook disappearing back into his jacket. Remember, Ethan, he said, his hand on the door handle. First thing tomorrow, it's your only shot. Before I could respond, he stepped out, vanishing into the storm as quickly as he'd appeared. I sat there, the engine idling, rain pattering on the roof, the weight of his words anchoring me to the seat. Finally, I pulled out my phone and dialed Laura's number. Hey, I said when she answered, my voice thick with emotion. I'm almost home, but there's something I need to tell you when I get there. As I hung up and shifted into drive, a strange mix of dread and relief washed over me. The road ahead would be brutal. Confession, consequences, the unraveling of the life I'd built. But for the first time in months, I felt unburdened, as if the stranger's words had lifted a veil. Mistmore Lane stretched before me, its shadows no longer quite so deep, and I drove toward home, ready to face the reckoning that awaited. The campfire's embers glowed like dying stars, casting a feeble warmth against the encroaching chill of Ravenwood Forest. I, Clara Voss, sat on a weathered log, a marshmallow impaled on a stick hovering over the flames, its edges browning in the heat. The forest, nestled in the heart of Belmont's untamed wilderness, had been my refuge for the weekend, a solitary escape from the relentless hum of city life. The day had been perfect. The crisp scent of pine, the rustle of leaves underfoot, the quiet that wrapped around you like a blanket. But now, as dusk bled into night, a sharp snap of a twig shattered my reverie, jolting me upright, the marshmallow forgotten as it sizzled into the fire. I held my breath, ears straining over the fire's soft crackle. The forest, so inviting in daylight, had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows, its trees looming like silent sentinels. Another sound, a deliberate crunch of leaves, too heavy for a deer or fox, sent my heart hammering. I'd come to Ravenwood alone, seeking solitude, but now that isolation felt like a noose tightening around my neck. Slowly, I set the stick down, my fingers closing around the flashlight beside me. Its cold metal a small anchor in the rising tide of fear. The beam sliced through the darkness, illuminating the dense undergrowth at the edge of my campsite, where shadows danced and twisted. Is anyone there? I called, my voice quavering, swallowed by the oppressive silence. No answer came, only the faint rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, a sound that now felt like a whisper of warning. Then I saw it, a flicker of movement just beyond the flashlight's reach, a dark shape flitting between the trees, too large, too purposeful to be an animal. My pulse surged, a cold sweat prickling my skin. I stood, legs unsteady, the fire's warmth no match for the chill that gripped me. The shape moved again, closer now, a silhouette that seemed to absorb the light. Fight or flight took hold, and flight won. I doused the fire with a frantic kick of dirt, plunging the campsite into near total darkness. Fumbling in the dim glow of my flashlight, I shoved essentials into my backpack. Water bottle, granola bars, a folded map I hadn't checked in hours. The sound of footsteps grew louder, no longer stealthy, as if the pursuer knew I'd spotted them. They were coming and they weren't hiding it anymore. I abandoned the rest of my gear, tent, sleeping bag, all sacrificed to speed, and bolted into the forest, the flashlight's beam bobbing wildly. Branches whipped at my face, their sharp edges drawing stinging lines across my cheeks. Roots seemed to rise from the earth to trip me, each step a gamble against the uneven terrain. Fear propelled me deeper into Ravenwood, the forest's silence now a cacophony of imagined threats. Every snap, every rustle a sign of pursuit. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to move, to put distance between me and whatever hunted me in the dark. After what felt like an eternity but was likely only minutes, I stopped, gasping for breath, my lungs burning as I leaned against a gnarled oak. The forest was a maze, its paths indistinguishable in the moonlight. In my panic, I'd run blindly, abandoning any sense of direction. The realization hit like a physical blow. I was lost, utterly adrift in a wilderness that stretched for miles. I fumbled in my backpack for the map and compass, but my heart sank. They were still at the campsite, left behind in my haste. My phone, useless without signal, flickered with a dying battery, its screen a mocking reminder of my isolation. A twig snapped nearby, sharp and deliberate, and I stifled a scream, clapping a hand over my mouth. They were still out there, tracking me through the darkness with an ease that defied logic. How could they follow so effortlessly in this labyrinth of trees? I took off again, my legs protesting, my flashlight's beam growing weaker with every step. The forest seemed to conspire against me, its branches clawing at my jacket, its shadows shifting to obscure my path. My lungs ached, my vision blurring with exhaustion, but terror kept me moving. The thought of capture a spur in my side. Suddenly, the ground vanished beneath me. I tumbled down a steep embankment, leaves and dirt cascading around me as I rolled, my flashlight slipping from my grasp. I came to a stop at the bottom. The wind knocked out of me, my body bruised and scraped. For a moment, I lay there dazed, the stars above a cruel contrast to the chaos below. Then I heard it, the careful crunch of footsteps descending the slope, methodical, unhurried. Panic surged, giving me strength. I staggered to my feet, ignoring the sharp pain in my ankle, and limped forward, the flashlight lost but the moonlight enough to guide me. I stumbled into a small clearing, the trees parting to reveal a sky ablaze with stars. In another life, it would have been breathtaking, a moment to pause and marvel. But now a branch cracked at the clearing's edge, and I spun around, my eyes straining in the dim light. A figure stood there, a tall silhouette against the darker backdrop of the forest, their features obscured by shadow. My breath hitched, my hands raised instinctively, as if I could ward them off with will alone. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice raw with fear and exhaustion, echoing through the clearing like a plea to the indifferent night. "I want you to listen," the figure replied, their voice deep and resonant, cutting through the silence like a blade. They took a step forward, and I backed away, my heart pounding. "I'm not here to hurt you, Clara." The sound of my name was a shock, like ice water down my spine. How could they know who I was? My mind raced, conjuring possibilities. A stalker, a private investigator, someone sent by my ex, Marcus, who'd vowed to find me after I left him. "Stay back," I cried, my voice trembling. I, I have a knife. It was a desperate bluff, and the figure knew it. No, you don't, they said, their tone almost gentle, tinged with amusement. You left it at your campsite, along with everything else. They stepped closer, and in the moonlight, I could make out details. A tall man, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark, practical clothing that blended with the night. His face was partially hidden by a cap, but a thick beard framed his jaw, and his eyes glinted with a quiet intensity. He held up something that caught the light, my camping knife, its blade gleaming like a promise. My stomach dropped. He'd been to my campsite, rifled through my things. How long had he been watching me? Who are you? I demanded, my voice cracking. Why are you doing this? My name doesn't matter, he said, taking another step, the knife held loosely at his side. What matters is why you're here, Clara. I know you're running from something or someone. My breath caught, memories of Marcus's threats flashing through my mind. Had he hired this man to track me down? To drag me back to the life I'd fled? But the stranger shook his head as if reading my thoughts. I'm not working for your ex. If that's what you're thinking, I'm here to help you. Help me? I laughed, the sound brittle, bordering on hysteria. By chasing me through the woods in the middle of the night? He didn't smile, his expression solemn, almost pained. I had to be sure you were alone. There are things you need to know, Clara. Things about why you're here, about what you're running toward. His words hung in the air, cryptic and heavy. But before I could press him further, a new sound broke the silence. A low, guttural growl from the forest behind him. Not animal, but something else. Something that sent a primal shiver through me. The stranger's eyes widened, his posture shifting to one of alertness. We don't have much time, he said, his voice urgent. They're coming. Who's coming? I asked, my fear spiking, but he didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed my arm, his grip firm but not cruel, and pulled me toward the edge of the clearing. Run, he said, his voice low. Don't look back. I didn't argue. We plunged back into the forest, the stranger leading the way, his movements sure despite the darkness. The growl grew louder, joined by the crash of branches as if something massive was tearing through the undergrowth. My ankle throbbed, my lungs burned, but I kept pace, driven by the certainty that stopping meant death. The stranger's presence was both a comfort and a mystery. Why was he helping me? What did he know? We reached a narrow stream, its water glinting in the moonlight, and the stranger pulled me behind a boulder, his hand signaling silence. The growling stopped, replaced by an eerie quiet, the forest holding its breath. Stay low, he whispered, his eyes scanning the trees. They're close. I nodded, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would betray us. Minutes passed, each one an eternity, until the stranger relaxed slightly, his shoulders easing. They've passed for now, he said, his voice barely audible. But we need to keep moving. There's a ranger station a few miles east. We can get help there. Who are they? I asked, my voice trembling. What do they want? He hesitated, his eyes meeting mine, and for a moment I saw something like pity in his gaze. They're hunters, he said carefully. Not for game, but for people like you. People who stumble into places they shouldn't. You saw something in Ravenwood, didn't you? Something you weren't meant to see. My mind flashed to the strange lights I'd glimpsed earlier that day, deep in the forest, pulsing, unnatural, like a beacon from another world. I dismissed it as a trick of the light, but now, what was it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Something old, he said, his tone grim. Something that doesn't belong here. I've been tracking it, trying to stop it, but you're in danger now, Clara. They know you saw. Before I could ask more, a distant howl split the night, closer than before. The stranger grabbed my hand, pulling me to my feet. No time, run. We ran, the forest a blur of shadow and moonlight, the howls growing louder, more insistent. My body screamed for rest, but the stranger's urgency kept me moving, his presence a lifeline in the chaos. After what felt like hours, we burst onto a gravel road, the ranger station's lights a faint glow in the distance. The howls faded, the forest falling silent once more, but the stranger didn't slow. "Keep going," he said, his voice hoarse. "Don't stop until you're safe." We reached the station, its door swinging open to reveal a startled ranger, his radio crackling with static. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping, as the stranger spoke urgently to the ranger, his words a blur of emergency and pursuit. When I looked up, he was gone, vanished into the night as if he'd never been there. The ranger called for backup, and within hours, I was safe, wrapped in a blanket, recounting my story to skeptical but concerned authorities. I never saw the stranger again, never learned his name or his purpose. The official report cited a possible animal attack, but I knew the truth. Something unnatural haunted Ravenwood, something that hunted with purpose. I returned to Velma, to the safety of city lights, but the forest shadow lingered. Sometimes in the quiet of night, I hear that howl in my dreams, and I wake with a certainty. The stranger saved me, but the hunt is far from over. Ravenwood keeps its secrets, and I pray I never cross its paths again. The night was heavy with the scent of damp earth and old wood as I lay in bed. The silence of Thornfield Grange, broken by a sound that didn't belong. A soft, lilting giggle, like the laughter of children playing in a dream. It was faint, drifting through the darkened halls of the sprawling estate, but unmistakable. My heart quickened, a chill creeping up my spine. My name is Lucas Grayson, and my partner Elise and I had just moved into this weathered manor on the outskirts of Dunraven, a sleepy village nestled in the rolling moors of Elderglen. The house, with its ivy-clad stone walls and creaking gables, was a steal, a bargain too good to pass up, the realtor had said, her smile bright but brittle. A treasure of history, she'd called it, handing over the keys with an eagerness that now felt like a warning. But that first night, as the phantom laughter echoed, I wondered if we'd bought more than a home. I nudged Elise awake, her face soft with sleep in the moonlight, filtering through the heavy drapes. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the house's ambient groans. She blinked, her brow furrowing as she listened. The laughter faded, replaced by the familiar creaks of ancient timbers settling. "Hear what?" she murmured, her voice thick with drowsiness. I shook my head, the sound now a ghost in my memory. "Nothing. Just a dream, I guess." But I knew it wasn't. The laughter had been too real, too close, resonating in the marrow of my bones. It marked the beginning of something unsettling, a crack in the facade of our new life. Thornfield Grange was a relic, its sprawling rooms filled with the echoes of a century past. Its wraparound veranda overlooked acres of windswept heath, and gnarled oaks stood sentinel around the property, their branches clawing at the sky. We'd fallen in love with its charm, the promise of a quiet life, a canvas for our future. But in the weeks that followed, the house revealed a darker side. Objects moved without explanation, a vase appearing on a different shelf, keys found in rooms we hadn't entered. Certain corners grew inexplicably cold, the air thick with a frost that left our breath visible even on mild days. And always, there was the laughter, soft, fleeting, like a child's game played just out of sight. Elise tried to rationalize it, her pragmatism a shield against the unease. "We're still settling in," she'd say, her voice firm. "We're misplacing things, that's all. The cold spots are just drafts. This place is older than the hills." The laughter, she insisted, was likely children from a nearby farm, their voices carried by the moorland winds. I wanted to believe her, to cling to her logic, but deep down I knew the truth. Thornfield Grange was alive with secrets, and they were beginning to stir. The turning point came a month after we moved in. I was in the attic, a cavernous space thick with dust and the musty scent of forgotten lives, sorting through crates of the previous owner's belongings. The task was tedious, the air heavy with the weight of history, when my fingers brushed against something hidden behind a loose panel in the wall. A small, leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and faded, as if it had been waiting for me. Curiosity overcame caution, and I opened it, the pages brittle under my touch. The handwriting was delicate, almost frantic, belonging to Abigail Thornton, the matriarch of the family who'd built this house in the 1870s. As I read, a chill settled over me, the attic's shadows growing sharper, more menacing. Abigail's words painted a harrowing tale. The land beneath Thornfield Grange was cursed, she wrote, a sacred site revered by the region's ancient inhabitants who'd warned the Thorntons against building here. They called it a veil between worlds, a place where the fabric of reality was thin. But Ezekiel Thornton, stubborn and ambitious, had dismissed their pleas, erecting the grand estate as a monument to his will. At first, all seemed well, the family thriving in their new home. But then their children began to change. They grew distant, speaking of unseen playmates and games played in empty rooms. Abigail described hearing laughter when no one was there, toys moving of their own accord, and fleeting glimpses of shadowed figures in the corners of her vision. The journal's tone grew desperate as the entries progressed. One by one, the Thornton children vanished. 5 in all, each disappearance marked by a surge in the house's strange phenomena. Abigail's final entry, dated 1883, was a scrawl of terror. They're coming for me now. I hear their laughter, closer than ever. God forgive us for what we've done. The words ended mid-sentence, as if she'd been interrupted, the ink trailing into a jagged smear. I closed the journal, my hands trembling. The attic suddenly colder, the air thick with an unseen presence. A soft giggle echoed behind me, so close I felt the breath of it on my neck. I spun around, but the attic was empty, its shadows mocking my fear. I stumbled down the attic stairs, the journal clutched to my chest, and found Elise in the kitchen, humming as she chopped vegetables for dinner. The normalcy of the scene was jarring, a stark contrast to the horror I'd just uncovered. Elise, I said, my voice shaking, we need to talk about this house. I poured out the journal's contents, the curse, the children, the vanishings, my words tumbling over each other in a rush. Elise's face paled, her knife pausing mid-cut, and I saw the flicker of doubt warring with the fear she'd tried to suppress. Lucas, she said slowly, setting the knife down. I think I've seen them too. She confessed to glimpses of figures in mirrors, always at the edge of her vision, vanishing when she turned. She'd felt watched even when alone, and had woken from dreams of children calling her name, their voices pleading for help. We sat in stunned silence, the journal between us like a Pandora's box, its secrets now ours to bear. What could we do? Call a priest? List the house for sale and hope to pass its curse to another unsuspecting buyer? The questions hung unanswered, heavy as the moorland fog. Before we could decide, the kitchen lights flickered, a low hum vibrating through the room. The temperature plummeted, our breath clouding in the air, and the laughter returned, louder, more insistent, coming from every corner of the house. Elise grabbed my hand, her nails digging into my skin. Lucas, she whispered, her voice trembling, we need to get out. We ran for the front door, but it refused to budge, the knob turning uselessly, as if held by an unseen force. The back door, the windows, even the cellar hatch, all were sealed, the house a prison of its own making. The laughter grew deafening, interwoven with the patter of small feet and childish voices chanting, "Play with us. Stay with us forever." We retreated to the parlor, huddling against the fireplace, as the house came alive around us. Books flew from shelves, their pages fluttering like frantic birds. Furniture scraped across the floor, chairs toppling with a crash. The air was thick with cold, the laughter a chorus that drowned out our gasps. Elise, her eyes wide with terror, spotted something glinting on the mantel, a small obsidian arrowhead, its edges sharp and ancient, likely a relic from the land's original stewards. "The journal," she gasped, ducking as a candlestick whizzed past her head. "It said this land was sacred. Maybe," she didn't finish, but I understood. I lunged for the arrowhead, my fingers closing around it just as an invisible force tugged at it, trying to wrench it free. The moment I gripped it, the chaos stopped. The laughter cut off, the objects fell to the floor with a clatter, and the cold dissipated, leaving only the faint crackle of the fire. The silence was deafening, a void where terror had reigned. We didn't wait to test the reprieve. The front door swung open easily now, and we fled into the night. Still in our slippers, the arrowhead clutched tightly in my hand. We drove through the moors, the Grange's silhouette shrinking in the rearview mirror, until we crossed into the next county, not stopping until dawn painted the sky. We never returned. We hired a company to pack our belongings and sell the property, ensuring the arrowhead and Abigail's journal were included, a warning to future owners. We insisted the realtor disclose the house's history, though last I heard, Thornfield Grange remains unsold, its charming, historic listing-gathering dust. Elise and I settled in a bustling city, surrounded by the comforting hum of traffic and neighbors. But the memory of Thornfield Grange lingers. Sometimes in the quiet of night, I wake to the echo of children's laughter, my heart racing until I hear the city's pulse outside. We rarely speak of that house, preferring to pretend it was a shared delusion, a trick of stress and imagination. But we both know the truth. The questions it left behind, why us, why that house, what became of those children, haunt us still, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. Some mysteries are better left buried, some doors better left unopened. If you ever find yourself in Dunraven, passing a grand old manor for sale at a price too good to be true, keep driving. Because in the shadows of Thornfield Grange, something waits, laughing softly, ready to welcome you home. The neon sign of Tony's Pizzeria flickered like a dying ember, its red glow stuttering against the rain-soaked pavement of the empty lot. I, Caleb Morrow, glanced at the dashboard clock, 11:43 p.m., and sighed, the weight of a long shift pressing against my temples. I'd been slinging pizzas for Tony's for nearly a year, a gig to fund my community college tuition in the sleepy town of Asheville. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and most nights were uneventful. Drop off a pie, pocket a tip, move on. Tonight, though, as I grabbed the final order from the passenger seat, a prickle of unease settled in my gut, as if the storm brewing outside carried more than just rain. The pizza box was warm in my hands, steam curling from its vents. The order ticket taped to the top, one large pepperoni, extra cheese for 47 Old Quarry Road, way out in Grimshaw Hollow. The address was at the edge of our delivery zone, a part of Asheville I rarely ventured into. A maze of winding back roads flanked by dense woods and crumbling farmhouses. The rain intensified as I pulled out of the lot, fat droplets hammering the windshield, the wipers struggling to keep up. The streets of downtown Asheville gave way to narrower lanes, the houses growing sparser, their windows dark and uninviting. Soon I was on a lonely stretch of asphalt, the forest closing in like a tunnel, its pines swaying in the wind's mournful howl. My GPS chirped, directing me onto a gravel track so overgrown it was barely a suggestion. Branches scraped the sides of my beat-up hatchback, their claws screeching against the paint, and the tires crunched over loose stones, the sound swallowed by the storm. After what felt like an eternity, the trees parted, revealing a dilapidated house crouched at the end of the path. Its sagging roof and peeling siding seemed to sag under the weight of neglect. But a single light burned on the second floor, a lone beacon in the darkness. I parked, the engine ticking as it cooled, and grabbed the pizza, the box already cooling in the damp air. The porch steps groaned under my weight, each creak a protest against my presence, and the air was thick with the scent of wet wood and something sharper, metallic, that made my nose wrinkle. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles met the door, it swung open with a slow, deliberate creak. The man who stood there was a tower of menace, easily over 6 feet, with a wild beard that seemed to devour his face. His eyes, deep-set and unblinking, bored into me, and his stained tank top and frayed jeans spoke of a life lived on the edge. "Pizza delivery," I stammered, holding out the box, my voice thin against the storm's roar. His face split into a grin, too wide, too sharp, like a predator baring its teeth. "Right on time, kid," he growled, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in my chest. "Why don't you bring it inside? Gotta grab my wallet." Every instinct screamed at me to bolt, to toss the pizza and run back to the safety of my car. The man's presence was a physical weight, his gaze pinning me like a specimen under glass. But I was new to this job, still on probation, and the thought of losing it, of facing Tony's wrath or scraping by without the income, kept me rooted. Against the howling of my better judgment, I stepped inside, the door closing behind me with a soft thud that felt like a trap snapping shut. The house was a cavern of shadows, its interior a chaotic sprawl of clutter. Piles of old newspapers teetered against walls stained with age, and the air was thick with the acrid bite of cigarette smoke, undercut by that metallic tang I couldn't place. The man led me through a narrow hallway, its floorboards creaking underfoot, into a dimly lit living room. A coffee table sat at its center, littered with crushed beer cans, overflowing ashtrays, and a scattering of what looked like rusted tools. "Set it there," he said, gesturing to the table, his eyes never leaving me. "Be right back with the cash." He lumbered up a creaky staircase, his heavy footsteps echoing in the stillness, leaving me alone in the oppressive room. My heart pounded, a frantic rhythm that drowned out the rain's steady drumbeat. I scanned the space, searching for an exit, a back door, a window, anything to anchor me in case I needed to run. That's when I saw it, tucked in the far corner, partially obscured by a tattered armchair, a duffel bag, its zipper half open, revealing the glint of a gun barrel nestled within. My breath caught, my body freezing as the implications sank in. This wasn't just an eccentric customer or a rough-around-the-edges recluse. Something was deeply, dangerously wrong here. I turned to leave, my sneakers silent on the warped floor, but the sound of the man's footsteps descending the stairs stopped me cold. Panic surged, a tidal wave that threatened to drown me. I couldn't let him know I'd seen the gun, couldn't give him a reason to suspect I was anything but a clueless delivery kid. I forced myself to stand still, my hands clasped in front of me as he reappeared, a wad of crumpled bills clutched in his meaty fist. "Here you go," he said, thrusting the money toward me, his grin now a grimace. "Keep the change." My hand shook as I reached for the cash, and in that moment I noticed dark stains on his knuckles, splotches that looked disturbingly like dried blood, crusted and flaky. My throat tightened, my voice barely a croak. "Thanks. Have a good night." I turned to go, forcing my steps to remain steady, though every fiber of my being screamed to sprint. I was inches from the hallway when a muffled thump echoed from upstairs. followed by a choked, desperate sound. A cry, stifled but unmistakable. My blood ran cold, my feet faltering. The man's hand clamped onto my shoulder, his grip like a vice, his fingers digging into my flesh. "You hear something, kid?" he asked, his voice low, laced with a menace that made my skin crawl. I shook my head, not trusting my voice, my eyes darting to the front door, so close yet impossibly far. "Nothing," I managed, the lie bitter on my tongue. His eyes narrowed, searching mine for a crack in my facade. "Good," he said, his tone a warning, "'cause there's nothing to hear. Now get going. These roads ain't safe at night." He released me, practically shoving me toward the door, which slammed shut behind me with a force that rattled the frame. I stumbled down the porch steps, my legs trembling, the rain a cold slap against my face. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them in a puddle, cursing as I fished them out. As I slid into the driver's seat, I risked one last glance at the house. The headlights swept across the facade, and there in the upstairs window, I saw a face, a woman's, pale and gaunt, her mouth open in a silent scream, her eyes wide with terror. I didn't hesitate. I threw the car into reverse, the tires spinning on the gravel as I sped back down the track, branches clawing at the windows like desperate hands. The image of that face burned in my mind, a haunting tableau of fear that I couldn't shake. I drove straight to the Asheville police station, the pizza box forgotten on the passenger seat, and spilled everything to the desk sergeant. The gun, the blood, the cry, the face in the window. My voice shook, but I held nothing back, urgency overriding my fear of sounding unhinged. The police acted swiftly, dispatching a team to 47 Old Quarry Road. They found evidence of illegal activity, weapons, drugs, and signs of captivity, but the man and the woman were gone. The house abandoned as if they'd known I'd talk. The investigation stretched on, but the details grew murky, the case fading into the haze of Ash Valley's quiet rhythm. For me, though the night was a turning point, I quit delivering for Tony's, trading late-night runs for a safer job at the college library. But the memory of Grimshaw Hollow lingers, a shadow that darkens my dreams. Each time I drive past a lonely road, I see that woman's face, her silent plea echoing in the silence. And I know, deep down, that some deliveries carry a weight far heavier than a pizza box, a burden you carry for the rest of your life. The rain was a relentless curtain, shrouding the world in a gray haze as I guided my battered station wagon along the twisting backroads of Varnholt County. The wipers thrashed against the deluge, their rhythmic squeak a counterpoint to the storm's mournful howl. I, Nora Fielding, was on a cross-country drive, fleeing the chaos of city life for a fresh start in a coastal town far from the memories that haunted me. My map, outdated and creased, had led me astray hours ago, the GPS long since silenced by the lack of signal in these remote hills. The fuel gauge hovered near empty, and the weight of my decision to take this shortcut pressed against my chest like a stone. Then, through the fog, I glimpsed it, a cluster of lights warm and inviting, nestled in the valley below. A town, uncharted on my map, but a beacon of hope in the storm. I eased the car down a narrow lane, the tires crunching over wet gravel until the lights resolved into the quaint silhouette of Eldergrove. The town was a postcard from another era, its clapboard houses and cobblestone streets bathed in the soft glow of gaslit lanterns. Storefronts with hand-painted signs, Eldergrove General Store, Mabel's Diner, lined a central square, their windows fogged with condensation. Despite the late hour, the town hummed with a strange vitality, figures moving in the rain, their faces obscured by umbrellas and wide-brimmed hats. Relief washed over me as I parked near the diner, the promise of a hot meal and directions lifting the fog of exhaustion. The diner's bell jingled as I stepped inside, the air thick with the aroma of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon. Heads turned, a dozen pairs of eyes fixing on me with a curiosity that bordered on hunger. The patrons, men in flannel, women in floral dresses, children with neatly combed hair, seemed plucked from a 1950s photograph, their smiles bright but oddly uniform. A woman with a bouffant hairstyle and a crisp apron approached, her name tag reading Evelyn. "Well, hello, stranger," she said, her voice warm as honey but sharp at the edges. "What brings you to Elder Grove on such a stormy night?" I explained my situation, lost, low on fuel, needing a place to rest. Evelyn's smile widened, her eyes glinting in the diner's soft light. "You poor thing. Car trouble's no fun at all. I'm Evelyn, and this here's my place. Why don't you come in, warm up? We'll get you sorted." Her kindness was a balm, though something in her gaze, a flicker of intensity, set my nerves on edge. She ushered me to a booth, the red vinyl creaking under my weight, and set a steaming mug of coffee before me. "On the house," she said, waving off my thanks. "Now tell me, where you headed?" I sipped the coffee, its bitterness grounding me, and shared my plan to start over on the coast. The other patrons listened, their conversations falling silent, their eyes never straying from me. A man in a fedora leaned forward, his smile mirroring Evelyn's. "New beginnings, eh? Elder Grove's a fine place for that. Quiet, simple. Folks here look out for each other." The words were welcoming, but the air felt charged, as if the room held its breath. Evelyn returned with a plate of pie, apple, warm, and fragrant with cinnamon. "Eat up," she urged. "You'll need your strength." I took a bite, the sweetness exploding on my tongue, but a strange aftertaste lingered, sharp and metallic. My head swam, a sudden drowsiness tugging at my limbs. I tried to focus, to thank Evelyn, but my words slurred and the room tilted. "I think I need to lie down," I managed, my voice distant, as if spoken by someone else. Evelyn's smile was a crescent moon, serene yet unsettling. "Of course, dear. We've got a room upstairs just for travelers like you. Come along." She helped me to my feet, her grip firm, and led me up a narrow staircase to a small room, its walls papered in faded roses. The bed was soft, the quilt heavy, and as I sank into it, the world blurred. Evelyn's voice drifted through the fog. "Rest now, Nora. You're safe here." The door clicked shut, and darkness claimed me. I woke to sunlight streaming through lace curtains, the storm a distant memory. The room was quaint, almost too perfect, with a porcelain wash basin and a mirror that reflected my disheveled state. My head throbbed, my mouth dry, but the drowsiness had lifted, replaced by a gnawing unease. I checked my phone, no signal, the battery nearly dead, and realized my car keys were missing from my pocket. Panic flickered, but I pushed it down, dressing quickly and heading downstairs. The diner was bustling, the air alive with chatter and the clink of cutlery. Evelyn greeted me with that same radiant smile. "Good morning. Nora, sleep well? Your car's being looked at by our mechanic, Amos. He'll have it ready by noon." I forced a smile, my mind racing. "Thanks, Evelyn. I appreciate it. Could I get my keys back? I'd like to check on things." Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened, a fleeting shadow crossing her face. "Oh, no need to worry. Amos has everything in hand. Why don't you join us for breakfast? Meet the folks who make Elder Grove special." The invitation felt less like a suggestion and more like a command, the air in the diner thickening with expectation. The patrons watched me, their smiles identical, their eyes gleaming with that same hungry curiosity I'd noticed the night before. A woman with a tight bun and a starched dress slid into the booth beside me, her perfume cloying. "I'm Ruth," she said, her voice saccharine. "Elder Grove's home, Nora. You'll see, it's where you belong. The words sent a chill down my spine, their certainty unnerving. I tried to steer the conversation to my departure, but every question was deflected with platitudes about the town's charm, its simplicity, its sense of family. The food arrived, pancakes, eggs, bacon. But the metallic aftertaste returned, sharper now, and my unease grew. I excused myself, claiming a need for fresh air, and slipped outside, the cobblestone street gleaming in the morning sun. Elder Grove was a picture of perfection. Children played hopscotch. Men tipped their hats. Women hung laundry that fluttered in the breeze. But the perfection was brittle, like a stage set hiding something rotten beneath. I wandered toward the garage, hoping to find my car, but the mechanic, a burly man with Amos's name stitched on his overalls, met me with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Car's not quite ready, miss," he said, wiping grease from his hands. "Needs a new part. Might take a day or two." My stomach dropped. "A day or two? I need to leave today. Where are my keys?" He chuckled, the sound hollow. "Safe and sound with Evelyn. Best talk to her." Frustration boiled, but I nodded, retreating to the diner where Evelyn was waiting, her smile unwavering. "Amos says my car needs a part," I said, my voice tight. "I'd like my keys back. I'll find a tow truck." Her smile turned mournful, her hand resting on mine, her touch sending a jolt through me, electric and disorienting. "Oh, Nora, don't you see? Nobody leaves Elder Grove. Not really, but you'll come to love it here like we all do." The words were a trap, their sweetness laced with menace. A group of townsfolk appeared in the doorway, their smiles mirroring Evelyn's, their eyes alight with that unsettling hunger. "Come downstairs," Evelyn said, her grip tightening. "Meet your new family properly. You're one of us now." I wanted to resist, to scream, to run, but her touch was a current, pulling me under. The idea of staying, of belonging to this perfect, timeless place, began to seep into me, eroding my resolve. Hadn't I wanted a simpler life, a place to call home? As Evelyn led me toward the stairs, the townsfolk falling in behind us like a silent procession, my resistance crumbled. The sun shone brightly outside, Elder Grove alive with the hum of a perfect day, and as I stepped into its embrace, hand in hand with my new family, the reasons I'd ever wanted to leave slipped away, lost in the town's eternal glow. The first gunshot tore through the tranquil stillness of duskwind forest, a sharp crack that sent a flock of starlings spiraling into the slate-gray sky. I froze, my boots rooted to the leaf-strewn trail, my heart hammering like a war drum in my chest. My name is Owen Kessler, a freelance photographer with a penchant for capturing the untamed beauty of Barnholt's wilderness. This solo hike was meant to be a balm for my restless soul, a day of crisp autumn air, vibrant foliage, and the solitude I craved after months in the city's clamor. But in an instant, that peace shattered, replaced by a primal fear that coiled around me like a serpent. I was miles from civilization, my phone useless without signal, and now it seemed I shared these woods with someone armed and dangerous. I stood motionless, my breath shallow, straining to hear over the rustle of leaves stirred by a chilly breeze. Duskwind Forest, a sprawling expanse of ancient pines and rocky ridges, had promised rugged trails and breathtaking vistas, perfect for my lens. The morning had delivered, golden sunlight filtering through canopies, the scent of resin heavy in the air, the crunch of pine needles underfoot. But now, as the echo of the shot faded, the forest felt like a trap, its beauty a veneer over something sinister. I tried to rationalize it, perhaps a hunter out of season but harmless. But the shot had been too close, too deliberate, and my gut screamed that this was no accident. Another shot rang out, closer this time, followed by muffled shouts, their words indistinct but laced with a raw, angry edge. My instincts kicked in, and I dove behind a moss-covered boulder, my camera bag thumping against my back. The forest, once a sanctuary, now felt like a labyrinth, its dense undergrowth hiding threats in every shadow. I pressed myself against the rock, its cold surface grounding me, and peered cautiously around its edge. My breath caught as I spotted them. Two figures crashing through the brush about 60 yards away, clad in camouflage and gripping rifles. Their movements were purposeful, their eyes scanning the ground with a predator's focus. Poachers, I realized, my stomach lurching. But their agitation, the urgency in their steps, suggested they weren't hunting game. They were hunting a person. Their voices carried on the wind, sharp and clear now. "He can't have gone far," one growled, his voice rough with frustration. "Not with that wound." "We can't let him get away," the other snapped, his tone taut. "If he talks, we're finished." The words hit like a punch. They were after someone who'd seen something they shouldn't, someone injured and fleeing for their life. And I was caught in the crossfire, a witness to a chase I wanted no part of. My mind screamed to stay hidden, to wait until they passed and then backtrack to my car as quietly as possible. But a stubborn voice, buried deep, refused to let me turn away. Someone out there was in danger, possibly dying, and I might be their only hope. Swallowing my fear, I made a decision that would redefine me, setting my course toward a confrontation I couldn't have imagined. As the poachers moved out of sight, their footsteps fading into the undergrowth, I crept from behind the boulder, moving in the opposite direction, my eyes scanning for any sign of their quarry. The forest was eerily silent now, as if holding its breath. The only sounds my ragged breathing and the soft crunch of leaves under my boots. I moved cautiously, my camera slung over my shoulder, its weight a reminder of the life I'd planned to capture. Not this nightmare. Every snapped twig, every rustle in the brush sent my heart racing. But I pressed on, driven by a need to help, to do something other than cower. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, I spotted a clue, a smear of crimson on a tree trunk, stark against the rough bark about chest height. Blood. My stomach churned, but I followed the trail, each drop a breadcrumb leading deeper into the woods. The sound of rushing water grew louder, and I emerged at the edge of a narrow creek, its surface glinting in the fading light. There, slumped against a lichen-covered boulder, was a man in his late 40s, his ranger's uniform soaked with blood. His face was pale, etched with pain, his eyes wide with fear as he saw me approach. His hand twitched toward a holster at his side, but I raised my hands, palms open. "I'm here to help," I whispered urgently. "Those men, they're after you, aren't they?" He nodded weakly, his breath labored. "Warden," he rasped, "saw their operation. Illegal poaching. Big. Dangerous." I knelt beside him, my first aid kit already in hand. The bullet had torn through his shoulder, the wound bleeding heavily but not immediately fatal. He'd lost a lot of blood, though, and in this wilderness, even a minor injury could be a death sentence. "We need to move," and I said, wrapping the wound with gauze as best I could, the fabric quickly staining red. "Can you walk?" He gritted his teeth and nodded, leaning heavily on me as I helped him to his feet. Our progress was agonizingly slow, each step a battle against his pain and the forest's treacherous terrain. The silence was oppressive, every sound amplified. A squirrel's scamper, a branch's creak, each one a potential harbinger of pursuit. I had no plan beyond putting distance between us and the poachers, hoping to find a ridge where my phone might catch a signal. The warden, whose name I learned was Ben, clung to me, his face a mask of determination despite his weakening state. We'd been moving for perhaps 20 minutes when voices drifted through the trees, carried on the wind, low, urgent, and far too close. Ben's grip tightened, his finger pointing to a rocky outcrop ahead. Caves, he whispered. We can lose them in there. It was a gamble. The cave system could trap us, a dead end with no escape. But with the poachers closing in, we had little choice. We scrambled up the incline, Ben's weight dragging at my shoulder, each step a test of endurance. Just as we reached the cave's mouth, a shout rang out behind us. There! And my heart lurched. They'd spotted us. Without hesitation, we plunged into the darkness, the cave's chill enveloping us like a shroud. The next few hours were a blur of shadow and stone, our footsteps echoing in the labyrinthine passages. Ben guided us as best he could, his knowledge of the terrain a lifeline, but his strength was fading, his breaths coming in shallow gasps. The cave was a maze of jagged walls and narrow tunnels, the air damp and heavy with the scent of earth and minerals. We paused in a wider chamber, faint light filtering through a crack above, revealing a space the size of a small garage. Ben collapsed against a wall, his face ashen, his eyes still sharp with resolve. We can't go further, I said, my voice trembling with exhaustion. We'll have to hold here. Ben nodded, his hand fumbling at his boot. Back up piece, he said, pulling out a small pistol. You know how to shoot? I shook my head, my experience limited to arcade games and childhood BB guns. He sighed, giving me a quick rundown. Point, aim, pull the trigger. The gun's weight foreign and terrifying in my hands. We didn't wait long. Footsteps echoed through the tunnel, growing louder, more deliberate. I positioned myself behind a rocky outcrop, my pulse a thunderous roar. Ben crouching nearby, his own weapon drawn despite his pain. The first poacher entered the chamber, his rifle sweeping the space, his eyes glinting in the dim light. I held my breath, my finger hovering over the trigger, praying I wouldn't need to act. A clatter of loose stones rained from above, startling him, and Ben seized the moment, lunging from his hiding spot to tackle the man. The rifle discharged, the sound deafening in the enclosed space, a flash illuminating the struggle. For a heart-stopping moment, I didn't know who'd been hit. Then the second poacher burst in, his weapon trained on Ben, his finger tightening on the trigger. Time slowed. Without thinking, I stepped from cover and fired, the pistol kicking in my hand, the shot going wide but enough to draw the poacher's attention. He turned, his rifle swinging toward me, but Ben used the distraction, knocking him down with a desperate surge of strength. In the chaos, I grabbed a coil of rope from my pack, and we bound the poachers, their curses muffled by the cave's echoes. They were subdued more by surprise than our skill, their rifles now useless at their sides. As the adrenaline ebbed, the reality of what we'd done crashed over me. I sank to the ground, my body trembling, the pistol heavy in my lap. Ben slumped beside me, his breathing ragged but steady, a faint smile on his lips. You did good, kid, he said softly. Not many would have stopped to help a stranger out here. I managed a weak grin, my voice shaky. Blame it on too many adventure novels growing up. A distant thrum caught our attention, the rhythmic chop of helicopter blades, faint but growing louder. Ben's face lit with relief. Back up, he said. Missed my check-in. They came looking. Sunlight flooded the chamber as the crack above widened, revealing a rescue team rappelling down. Within minutes, we were hoisted out, the poachers secured, our ordeal finally over. In the days that followed, the full scope of the operation came to light. The poachers were part of a sprawling illegal hunting ring, targeting endangered species across Barnholt's reserves. Our actions had sparked a major bust, dismantling a network that had operated in the shadows for years. Ben recovered, his gratitude evident in the commendation he ensured I received. But the true reward was knowing I'd made a difference, that I'd chosen courage over fear. Now when I hike, I carry a satellite phone, a beefier first aid kit, and a heightened awareness of the forest's secrets. Duskwind remains my sanctuary, but I tread its paths with eyes wide open, knowing that adventure and the chance to change a life might lurk just beyond the next bend. The wilderness is vast, its shadows deep, but sometimes the greatest battles are fought not against the dark, but within ourselves when we choose to stand and fight. The Iron Anchor was a tomb of silence at 11:58 p.m., its cavernous interior swallowed by the dim glow of flickering neon signs. The last call for drinks had echoed through the empty bar, my voice sounding hollow against the weathered oak beams and scuffed floorboards. I, Lena Carver, had tended bar here for 3 years, pouring pints and trading banter with the regulars of Port Varnholt, a coastal town where the sea's salt clung to everything. Tonight, though the place was a ghost ship, not a single soul had braved the howling storm outside, leaving me alone with the creak of the building and the relentless patter of rain against the stained glass windows. As I wiped the counter for what felt like the 100th time, a prickle of unease settled in my bones. A whisper that the night held something more than just bad weather. The ancient clock above the bar ticked toward midnight, its hands moving with a sluggish inevitability. My boss, Charlie, had bailed early, leaving strict orders to lock up at the stroke of 12. No exceptions. I'd polished every glass, restocked every bottle, and swept the floor twice, the tasks of futile attempt to fill the void of the empty hours. A flash of lightning illuminated the world outside, followed by a thunderclap that rattled the windows, shaking loose a cascade of dust from the rafters. I jumped, nearly dropping the rag in my hand, and muttered to myself, "Get it together, Lena. It's just a storm." Then I heard it, a faint, deliberate scrape, barely audible over the rain's percussion, coming from the back of the bar near the storage room. My heart skipped, the sound out of place in the familiar rhythm of the Iron Anchor. I froze, straining my ears, the rag clutched tightly in my fist. There it was again, a slow, measured scratch like nails dragging across wood. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling despite my effort to sound firm. "We're closed," silence answered, thick and oppressive, broken only by the storm's distant growl. Then unmistakably, the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving toward me from the shadowed hallway. My pulse surged, a cold sweat prickling my skin. I scanned the bar for a weapon, my eyes landing on a heavy bottle of whiskey, its amber liquid glinting in the neon light. I gripped it tightly, the glass cool against my palm, and edged toward the end of the counter, my breath shallow. "I'm armed," I lied, my voice sharper now, "and I've called the cops." The footsteps paused, and for a moment I dared to hope I'd scared off whatever lurked in the dark. Then a voice, low and raspy, cut through the silence. "No, you haven't, Lena." A figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the faint glow of the bar's signs. He was tall and lean, his frame draped in a dark, rain-soaked coat, his face partially obscured by a hood. His movements were fluid, almost predatory, each step calculated as he approached the counter. The neon light caught his features, a sharp jawline, shadowed eyes, and a smile that was too wide, too knowing, revealing a flash of teeth that seemed to gleam unnaturally. My grip on the whiskey bottle tightened, my knuckles whitening. "We're closed," I repeated, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "You need to leave." He chuckled, the sound a low rumble that sent a shiver down my spine. "Oh, I don't think so. In fact, I think you're going to pour me a drink." He slid onto a bar stool with an unsettling grace, his eyes never leaving mine, their intensity pinning me in place. "Listen," I said, trying to keep my tone firm. "I don't want trouble. Take what's in the till and go. I won't call anyone, I swear." His smile widened, a predator eyeing its prey. "I'm not here for money, Lena. I'm here for something far more." Valuable. The way he said my name like he'd known it forever sent a fresh wave of fear crashing over me. I glanced at the door, calculating my chances of reaching it, but his gaze seemed to anticipate my thoughts, his smile sharpening. I wouldn't, he said softly. Now how about that drink? My bartender instincts kicked in, a reflex honed by years of muscle memory. I set the whiskey bottle down and reached for a glass, my hands trembling as I scanned the shelves for something to mix. What's your poison? I asked, forcing a casual tone, hoping to buy time. Surprise me, he replied, his eyes glinting with amusement, as if he knew I was stalling. I settled on a Manhattan, my hands moving on autopilot as I measured rye, vermouth, and bitters. The familiar routine steadied my nerves. If only slightly, the clink of ice, a small anchor in the storm of my fear. As I worked, I tried to engage him, fishing for any clue to his intentions. So, I said, keeping my voice light, you come to the Iron Anchor often. He smirked, clearly entertained by my attempt at small talk. First time? Actually. But I've been watching this place for a while. Watching you. The words were a knife, cold and precise, slicing through my fragile calm. My hands faltered, the cherry I was adding to the drink slipping from my fingers. Me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why? You're special. Lena, he said, leaning forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. You have something I need. I slid the drink across the counter, careful to keep my distance, my mind racing. Look, I'm just a bartender. I don't have anything valuable. Oh, but you do, he insisted, his fingers brushing the glass, his sleeve riding up to reveal a strange tattoo on his wrist. A labyrinth of interlocking spirals with an eye at its center, its design somehow wrong, as if it pulsed with a life of its own. You just don't know it yet. I caught myself staring, and he noticed, his smile curling with satisfaction. Curious, aren't you? He said. That's good. Curiosity is the first step. First step to what? I asked, unable to stop myself, though every instinct screamed to end this conversation. To awakening, he said, taking a sip of the Manhattan, his eyes never leaving mine. To seeing the world as it truly is. The words were cryptic, laced with a fervor that made my skin crawl. This wasn't just a creep or a thief. He was something else, something delusional, dangerous. I needed to get out, to end this before it spiraled further. Listen, I said, my voice firm, you've got the wrong person. The bar's closed, and I'm asking you to leave. His expression darkened, the friendliness evaporating like mist. I'm not going anywhere, Lena, and neither are you, not until you give me what I came for. And what's that? I demanded, anger flaring through my fear, my grip tightening on the counter's edge. In response, he reached into his coat and produced a small, intricately carved box, its dark wood etched with symbols that echoed the tattoo on his wrist. He set it on the counter, and I swore I heard a faint hum, a whisper of voices too soft to discern. In this box, he said, his voice low and intense, is a key that can only be wielded by someone with a rare gift. A gift you possess, whether you know it or not. I stared at the box, a wave of dread washing over me. Part of me wanted to smash it, to hurl it into the storm outside, while another part, a dangerous, curious part, wanted to know more. I forced myself to meet his gaze. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not special. I'm just trying to do my job. He shook his head, a look of pity crossing his face. Oh, Lena, there's nothing ordinary about you. Why do you think you've always felt different? Why do you sense things before they happen? Why do the whispers in this old bar speak to you when no one else hears them? My breath caught, his words striking a nerve I'd buried deep. I'd never told anyone about the whispers, faint, fleeting voices I'd heard in quiet moments at the Iron Anchor, dismissed as imagination or fatigue. But here was this stranger laying bare a secret I'd kept even from myself. What? What are you? I whispered, my voice trembling. His smile returned, tinged with a sorrow that felt almost human. I am a keeper, he said, one tasked with guarding the balance between this world and those beyond. And you, Lena, are a gatekeeper, one with the power to open doors that should remain sealed or to lock them forever. As he spoke, the air in the bar grew heavy, the shadows in the corners deepening, stretching toward us like living things. The whispers I'd ignored for years surged, a chorus of voices that seemed to press against my skull, urgent and insistent. This isn't real, I said, but the words felt hollow, a lie I could no longer believe. It's very real, he said softly, and it's time for you to embrace your role. Open the box, Lena. Claim the key. Accept your destiny. I looked at the box, its carvings seeming to writhe in the dim light, then back at him. In that moment, I stood at a crossroads, one path leading back to my ordinary life, pouring drinks and pretending the whispers were nothing, the other plunging into a world of mystery and danger I couldn't comprehend. The voices grew louder, a crescendo that drowned out the storm, and I knew there was only one choice. With a trembling hand, I reached for the box, my fingers brushing the cool wood. A jolt of energy surged through me, sharp and electric, and the box sprang open, revealing a key that shimmered with an otherworldly light, as if forged from starlight itself. I lifted it, and the world shifted. Reality peeling away to reveal glimpses of alien landscapes, fleeting moments of times not my own. The keeper nodded, his voice distant, as if from another plane. And so it begins. I clutched the key to my chest, its power thrumming through me, a current that both terrified and exhilarated. The Iron Anchor faded, its familiar walls dissolving into shadow, and with it, my old life as just another bartender in a sleepy coastal town. A new journey was dawning, one I'd been destined for all along, though I hadn't known it. Whatever lay ahead, whatever dangers this new reality held, I was ready, the key a beacon guiding me into the unknown. The morning was a canvas of golden light, the air crisp with the scent of pine and dew as Mia and I sat on the porch of our rented cabin at Blackthorn Ridge. Our coffee mugs steamed in the cool dawn, the porcelain warm against our palms as we gazed out over the serene expanse of Varnholt's wilderness. The cabin, a cozy retreat nestled deep in the forest, was our escape from the grind of city life. A long weekend to reconnect, to rediscover the spark that had dimmed under the weight of work and routine. Mia had found the listing online, a last-minute gem with no cell service, no Wi-Fi, just the promise of nature's embrace. Exactly what we need, she'd said, her eyes alight with excitement. No distractions, just us. For a day and a half, it had been paradise. Hikes through vibrant trails, swims in a crystalline lake, and evenings spent laughing over a crackling fire. But now, as the sharp crack of a branch snapping echoed from the woods, our sanctuary shattered. The forest's tranquility replaced by a pulse of dread. We froze, our mugs suspended midair, our eyes locking in a shared moment of alarm. The sound was too deliberate, too heavy for a deer or a falling limb. Mia's voice was a whisper, her hand trembling as she set her mug down. Did you hear that? I nodded, my mind racing to explain it away. Hikers, maybe, or the property's caretaker checking the grounds. But the forest had gone unnaturally quiet. The birds' chatter silenced, the breeze holding its breath. The air felt charged, heavy with an unseen threat. Get inside, I said, keeping my voice low, my heart thudding against my ribs. Lock the door, I'll check it out. Mia's eyes widened, her mouth opening to protest. But another sound cut her off. A metallic click, unmistakable. The sound of a gun being cocked. We moved as one, slipping inside the cabin and easing the door shut. The latch clicking softly in the tense silence. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of movement at the clearing's edge. Two figures, clad in camouflage, their faces obscured by scruffy beards and low-brimmed caps. They moved with a predator's grace, rifles slung across their shoulders, their eyes scanning the terrain with chilling focus. "What do we do, Ethan?" Mia whispered, her voice barely audible, her hand clutching my arm. I shook my head, my thoughts a tangle of fear and instinct. The cabin was a trap, 4 walls, a roof and no hidden passages to offer escape. We were cornered, the forest our only ally. But it was a treacherous one. The men drew closer, their voices now audible, sharp and urgent. "I'm telling you, I saw something," one said, his tone edged with paranoia. "Looked like a person." "Better not be," the other growled, his voice rough as gravel. "We can't have witnesses." The word witnesses was a blade, slicing through my denial. These weren't lost hunters or locals. They were dangerous, involved in something they'd kill to keep secret. Mia tugged at my sleeve, her eyes darting to the back of the cabin, where a small window sat high on the wall, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. It was our only chance, a desperate gamble against the threat closing in. We moved silently, gathering what we could. Our phones, useless without signal, a flashlight, a water bottle. Our movements swift but careful, every creak of the floorboards a potential betrayal. Mia worked the window, its hinges protesting with a faint squeak that sounded deafening in the stillness. I scanned the cabin for a weapon, my eyes landing on a cast iron skillet hanging above the stove, its weight reassuring in my hands. The window creaked open, the sound slicing through the tension, and we froze, listening for any sign we'd been heard. The voices outside had fallen silent, an ominous pause that tightened the knot in my stomach. "Go," I whispered, boosting Mia through the opening. She landed with a soft thud on the other side, and I passed her our meager supplies before squeezing through myself, the rough wood scraping my shoulders as I wriggled free. I was halfway out when the cabin door slammed open, the sound like a gunshot. "Hey!" a voice bellowed. "We've got runners!" Adrenaline surged, drowning out the pain as I tumbled to the ground, Mia pulling me to my feet. We sprinted into the forest, branches lashing our faces, roots rising like snares to trip us. The men's shouts echoed behind us, their footsteps crashing through the underbrush. No longer stealthy, but relentless. We ran blindly, the forest a blur of shadow and green, our lungs burning, our legs screaming for respite. Terror drove us, the thought of what awaited if we were caught a whip at our backs. We didn't speak, didn't look back, our only goal to outrun the predators at our heels. After what felt like hours, our bodies pushed beyond endurance. We ducked behind a massive fallen log, its mossy bulk a temporary shield. Gasping for breath, we pressed ourselves into the earth, the scent of decay and pine filling our lungs. "I think we lost them," Mia panted, her face flushed, streaked with dirt and sweat. I nodded, my throat too raw to speak, but the relief was fleeting. My mind churned, piecing together the fragments of our predicament. Who were these men? What were they hiding? The forest, once a haven, now felt like a cage, its vastness a maze with no exit. As our breathing slowed, the sounds of the wilderness returned, birds chirping, leaves rustling, a deceptive calm that did little to ease the dread coiling in my gut. This was no dream, no fleeting scare. We were in the heart of something dark, and survival was no longer a given. "We need to keep moving," I said, my voice hoarse, forcing clarity through the fog of fear. "Find a road, a town, somewhere we can get help." Mia nodded, her eyes wide but resolute. Which way? I pulled out my phone, more out of habit than hope, the screen confirming no signal but offering a compass app. The road we came in on was west, I said, orienting myself with the faint glow of the app. If we head that way, we'll hit it eventually. It was a flimsy plan, but it was all we had. We set off, moving as quietly as our trembling legs allowed, the forest shadows stretching long in the morning light. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the undergrowth, sent our pulses spiking, but each time it was just a squirrel or a gust of wind. We'd been walking for what felt like an eternity when a low rumble reached our ears, the distant growl of an engine. Hope flared, bright and desperate. A vehicle meant a road, a chance for rescue. We crept toward the sound, the trees thinning to reveal a clearing. But as we peered through the foliage, hope turned to ash. A dozen men, maybe more, stood around a cluster of heavy-duty trucks, unloading crates with practiced efficiency. Their contents were hidden, but the rifles slung across their backs, and the urgency in their movements painted a clear picture. This was no small-time operation. This was organized, professional, and deadly. Mia's hand tightened on my arm, her breath hitching. "We need to go," she whispered. "Now." Before we could move, a shout rang out. "Over there! I saw something!" And the world tilted into chaos. We ran, abandoning stealth, crashing through the underbrush as branches tore at our clothes and roots threatened to send us sprawling. Behind us, the men gave chase, their shouts mingling with the crack of gunfire, bullets splintering trees nearby. My lungs were fire, my legs lead, but fear propelled us. The image of those crates and rifles a spur in my side. We burst onto a dirt road, the open space a stark contrast to the forest's claustrophobia. To our left, it curved into shadow. To our right, 100 yards away, a rickety bridge spanned a deep gorge, its wooden slats swaying in the breeze. "The bridge!" Mia gasped, her voice raw. "We can hide underneath." It was a desperate plan. Hiding could trap us, but running further wasn't an option. We sprinted for the bridge, the men's shouts growing louder, their footsteps pounding the earth. As we reached it, I helped Mia down the steep embankment, her hands scraping against rocks as she slid to the space beneath the bridge's deck. I followed, my body protesting as we pressed ourselves against the cold concrete supports, our breaths ragged but stifled. The musty scent of damp wood and river mud thick in the air. Above us, boots thudded across the bridge, voices barking orders. "They can't have gone far," one said. "Spread out. Check the other side." "What if they went down to the river?" another asked, and my heart nearly stopped. A third voice, authoritative and impatient, cut through. "We don't have time for this. The buyer's due any minute. If they're gone, they're gone. We'll deal with it later." Back to base now. Grumbles followed, but the voices faded, replaced by the growl of engines starting and driving away. We stayed hidden, unmoving for what felt like hours, the forest silence, a fragile shield. Finally, I risked a whisper. "I think they're gone." Mia nodded, her face pale, tears streaking through the dirt on her cheeks. I hadn't noticed her crying, and the sight twisted something in my chest. "What now?" she asked, her voice small. I took a deep breath, forcing clarity through the haze of fear. "We follow the road," I said. "Stay in the trees out of sight. It's got to lead somewhere, a town, a highway." It was a thin thread of hope, but it was enough. We climbed back to the road, our bodies aching, and moved into the forest edge, keeping the dirt track in sight. Each step carried us further from the nightmare we'd stumbled into, closer to safety, or so I prayed. The reality of our situation was a weight we couldn't shake. We were lost, hunted by men who'd kill to keep their secrets, our survival hinging on wits and luck. But as I glanced at Mia, her jaw set despite her fear, a spark of determination ignited. We were in this together, and together, we'd find a way out. Our weekend retreat had become a fight for survival, a battle we hadn't chosen but were determined to win. The forest stretched before us, its shadows deep and unyielding, but we pressed on, driven by the promise of light beyond the trees and the resolve to live to tell a story some would kill the silence. The phone's shrill ring sliced through the stillness of my bedroom at 3:23 a.m., a jarring intrusion that yanked me from the depths of sleep. My heart lurched, my hand fumbling blindly for the device on the nightstand, knocking over a glass of water that splashed coldly across my wrist. The screen glowed with an unknown number, its digits stark against the darkness. I, Elise Warwick, a marketing coordinator in the coastal town of Havensport, stared at the phone, my mind foggy but alert with unease. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Nothing good comes from calls at this hour, but a nagging curiosity, or perhaps a flicker of dread, compelled me to answer. I pressed the phone to my ear, my voice thick with sleep. "Hello? I see you, Elise," a voice rasped, low and gravelly, like sandpaper dragged across stone. "You really should get thicker curtains." I bolted upright, the words a cold shock that banished all traces of drowsiness. My eyes darted to the bedroom window, where sheer curtains hung, their pale fabric glowing faintly in the moonlight. They'd always seemed delicate, charming even, but now they felt like a betrayal, offering no shield against the night beyond. I could almost feel eyes boring into me, a presence lurking in the shadows of Havensport's quiet streets. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite my effort to sound defiant. The voice chuckled, a sound that slithered through the phone, chilling my blood. "Just a friend, Elise. A friend who's been watching you for a very long time." I ended the call, my hand shaking so violently the phone nearly slipped from my grasp. It had to be a prank, a cruel joke by a bored teenager or a spiteful ex, someone looking to rattle me. But as I sat in the dark, the silence of my apartment now oppressive, the laughter lingered in my mind, a venomous echo that refused to fade. I tossed and turned, the creak of the old building's pipes and the rustle of leaves outside morphing into threats. Sleep was a lost cause, each shadow in the room a potential watcher, each sound a footstep drawing closer. When my alarm finally blared at 7 a.m., the soft dawn light filtering through the curtains was a lifeline, pulling me from the night's terror. I went through my morning routine, shower, coffee, toast, trying to convince myself it was nothing, a fleeting scare. But the unease clung to me, a shadow I couldn't shake. The day at the office was a blur of emails and meetings, the mundane rhythm of Havensport's marketing firm a fragile anchor. I pushed the call to the back of my mind, focusing on campaign deadlines and client pitches. It wasn't until I was packing up to leave, the office nearly empty, that the memory surged back, triggered by a buzz from my phone, a text from an unknown number. "Blue looks good on you, Elise, but I like the green dress you wore last Wednesday better." My blood ran cold. I glanced down at the blue blouse I'd thrown on that morning, then around the office, my heart pounding. The remaining co-workers were engrossed in their screens, oblivious to my panic, but the air felt charged, as if someone watched from just beyond my sight. I fled to my car, keys clutched like a talisman, my eyes scanning the parking lot for any sign of a follower. The drive home was a gauntlet of paranoia, every red light an eternity where I studied passing cars, every shadow a potential threat. Once inside my apartment, I double-checked the locks, drew the blinds tight, and collapsed onto the couch, my mind racing. Who could be doing this? An ex question mark, a disgruntled colleague? None of the pieces fit, the puzzle too vast, too sinister. Another buzz from my phone sent my heart into my throat. Another unknown number. You should eat something, Elise. That salad at lunch barely touched your plate. I threw the phone across the room, where it landed with a dull thud on the rug. How could they know what I'd eaten? The salad had been a quick grab from the office cafeteria, a meal I'd picked at distractedly. The violation was suffocating, as if my life was an open book, its pages rifled by unseen hands. The next week was a descent into paranoia. The calls and texts came relentlessly, always from different numbers, each revealing intimate details of my day. When I woke, what I wore, the podcast I listened to on my commute, even the romance novel I read in stolen moments, its pages a guilty pleasure I'd never shared. I changed my number, but the messages followed, as if the sender had burrowed into my life's core. I went to the Havensport police, my voice shaking as I recounted the harassment. But without overt threats, their hands were tied. "Keep a log," the officer said, his tone sympathetic but helpless. "We'll do what we can." I left the station feeling exposed, a target in a game I didn't understand. By the seventh day, I was a wreck, sleepless, barely eating, calling in sick to avoid the office's open windows and prying eyes. I sat in my darkened living room, blinds drawn, lights off, staring at my silent phone, dreading its next vibration. When it came, the message was different, a shift in tone that chilled me to the core. "It's time we met, Elise. Come to Bayside Park at midnight. Come alone, or there'll be consequences." My first instinct was to ignore it, to call the police, to flee Havensport entirely. But exhaustion and desperation gnawed at me, a part of me, the part tired of running, of living in fear, urging me to confront this tormentor, to end the nightmare. Against all reason, I found myself walking through Bayside Park just before midnight, the moon casting long shadows across the deserted paths. The air was thick with the scent of salt and seaweed, the distant crash of waves a steady counterpoint to my racing pulse. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made me flinch, my hands buried in my coat pockets, one clutching a can of pepper spray. As I neared the park's central fountain, its water glinting in the moonlight, a figure stood waiting, backlit by a street lamp, their features shrouded. "Hello, Elise," they said, and I recognized the raspy voice from that first call, now laced with a quiet triumph. "I'm glad you came." They stepped into the light, and my breath caught. It wasn't the menacing stranger I'd imagined, nor a vengeful ex. It was Claire, the quiet IT specialist from my office, her mousy demeanor replaced by a chilling confidence. Her glasses glinted, her smile twisted with a malice I'd never seen. "Why?" I choked out, my voice raw. "Why are you doing this?" Claire's smile widened, a serpent's grin that sent shivers down my spine. "Because I could, Elise. Because it was so easy. You people live your lives, oblivious to how exposed you are, how much you share with the world." She pulled out a tablet, its screen glowing as she tapped it, revealing a cascade of data, my emails, my search history, my fitness tracker's logs. Your phone, your laptop, your smart thermostat, they're all windows, Elise. Windows I can peer through with a few keystrokes. You were the perfect subject. Trusting, predictable, a canvas for my experiment. "Experiment?" I repeated, my voice trembling, the word a bitter pill. "To see how far I could go," she said, her eyes gleaming with a manic light. "How much I could learn, how deeply I could infiltrate your life without you knowing. And oh, Elise, you were a treasure trove. Your fears, your secrets, your little indulgences. It was intoxicating. Nausea churned in my gut. All this time she'd been spying on me, using my own devices to unravel my life. But why me? I asked, my voice breaking. What did I do to you? She laughed, a hollow sound that echoed across the park. Nothing. You were just convenient, the right mix of naive and connected, a test case for my skills. But every experiment has an end, Elise, and I'm afraid it's time to wrap this one up. As she spoke, her hand dipped into her coat, and I saw the glint of metal, a gun, its barrel catching the moonlight. Time slowed, my vision narrowing to that single point of danger. I saw her finger curl toward the trigger, the gun rising to aim at my chest. Survival instinct surged, a primal force that overrode my fear. I lunged forward, catching her off guard, my hands grappling for the weapon. We struggled in silence, our breaths harsh, the park's stillness a stark contrast to the violence unfolding. Claire was stronger than her slight frame suggested, but desperation fueled me, my fingers clawing at the gun's cold steel. A deafening bang shattered the night, the sound ringing in my ears. For a moment, I wasn't sure who'd been hit. My body braced for pain. Then Claire stumbled back, her eyes wide with shock, her hand clutching her chest where a red stain bloomed across her shirt. She looked at me, a mix of disbelief and fury, before collapsing to the ground, the gun clattering beside her. I stood frozen, the weapon heavy in my hand, my mind reeling, my ears still ringing from the shot. The distant wail of sirens snapped me back, a sound I hadn't called for but welcomed like salvation. The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. Police swarmed the park, their questions a relentless tide as I recounted the nightmare. Claire's calls, her texts, the confrontation. She survived, barely, and was arrested. Her tablet revealing a network of victims, their lives laid bare by her digital intrusions. The full scope of her experiment emerged, a chilling testament to the fragility of privacy in a connected world. I became a cautionary tale, my story whispered in Havensport's cafes and offices, a warning of the shadows lurking in our devices. In the months that followed, I changed. I ditched my smart devices, traded my fitness tracker for a notepad, my smart thermostat for a manual one. The carefree Elise was gone, replaced by a woman who checked locks twice, who scanned rooms for hidden eyes. Healing came slowly, trust rebuilt in cautious steps, but I reclaimed my life piece by piece. Now as I write this, I do so as a warning. In this digital age, our lives are an open scroll, vulnerable to those who know how to read it. Be vigilant, be wary, and never forget. Someone might be watching, their gaze hidden in the glow of a screen, waiting to claim your secrets as their own. The study of Professor Evelyn Hawthorne was a labyrinth of knowledge, its walls lined with sagging bookshelves and cluttered with relics of a life spent chasing the unknown. The air was thick with the scent of old leather and dust, the kind that settled into your lungs and whispered of forgotten eras. I, Tessa Marrow, a graduate student at Dunraven College, stood amidst the chaos, a watering can in one hand and a stack of mail in the other. Professor Hawthorne, my thesis advisor and a renowned anthropologist, had entrusted me with house sitting while she attended a symposium in Paris. Just keep the plants alive and collect the post, she'd said, her eyes distracted, her smile fleeting as she handed me the keys to her Victorian townhouse in Havensport's historic district. Oh, and if you could tidy my study a bit, that'd be marvelous. What she hadn't mentioned was that her study was a vortex of disorder, a testament to decades of research that seemed to have exploded across every surface. For days, I'd waded through the mess, sorting papers yellowed with age, cataloging books whose titles hinted at esoteric mysteries, and dodging artifacts that looked like they belonged in a museum or a crypt. The task was daunting, the study a maze of teetering stacks and shadowed corners, but there was a thrill in it, a sense of unearthing secrets buried in the chaos. That thrill turned to dread when I found the box. It was tucked on a high shelf, hidden behind a pile of dusty tomes, its presence unassuming yet heavy with intent. Unlike the study's other relics, it was unmarked, sealed with brittle, yellowed tape that crumbled at my touch. As I lifted it, the contents shifted with a muffled thud, and a chill raced down my spine, as if the box itself were alive, watching me. I set it on the desk, the polished mahogany a stark contrast to the box's rough wood. My heart thudded, a warning I couldn't ignore. This wasn't part of my duties. Watering plants, sorting mail, organizing books. I should put it back, pretend I'd never seen it, and go about my tasks. But curiosity, that relentless spark, burned brighter than caution. The professor's study was a treasure trove of the extraordinary. What secrets might this box hold? Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed a letter opener from the desk, its silver blade glinting in the lamplight, and sliced through the tape. The sound sharp in the study's silence. A musty odor wafted out as I opened the flaps. The scent of ancient paper and something earthier, almost primal. Inside lay a collection of notebooks, their covers worn to a soft sheen, their pages brittle and yellowed. Scattered among them were photographs, newspaper clippings, and documents stamped with faded seals, all bearing the weight of decades. I lifted the topmost notebook, its leather cool against my fingers, and opened it to find Professor Hawthorne's distinctive script, though the date at the top, 1978, stopped me cold. She would have been in her early 20s, a young scholar embarking on her first expedition. As I read, the world around me faded. The ticking clock, the hum of Havensport's evening traffic, the creak of the old house, all dissolved, replaced by a story that seemed too fantastical to be true. The notebook chronicled Hawthorne's journey to a remote village in the jungles of Kalimdor, a place whispered about in academic circles as the home of a lost tribe with abilities that defied science. She wrote of people who spoke without words, their thoughts weaving through the air like threads of light, of healers who mended wounds with a touch, their hands glowing faintly, of seers who knew truths they couldn't have learned. At first, she sought rational explanations, cultural practices, herbal remedies, psychological phenomena. But the evidence mounted, forcing her to confront the impossible. Her words were alive with wonder, each page a testament to a discovery that could rewrite human history. Photographs slipped from the notebook, their edges curled with age. They showed villagers with intricate markings on their skin, glowing softly in the jungle's twilight, their eyes reflecting an otherworldly calm. Sketches detailed plants unknown to botany, their leaves annotated with notes on mystical properties, elixirs for visions, salves for the soul. Accounts of rituals filled the margins, ceremonies that bent time and space, defying the laws of physics. But as I turned the pages, the tone shifted, wonder giving way to fear. Hawthorne's entries grew hurried, her script jagged, describing unseen watchers in the jungle, accidents that felt orchestrated, whispers of betrayal among her team. The final page ended abruptly, mid-sentence. They know I've seen too much. I hear them now, closer. I set the notebook down, my hands trembling, the study's shadows pressing closer, as if the walls themselves were listening. This couldn't be real. A novel, perhaps, or a thought experiment. But the box's other contents painted a darker picture. Documents heavily redacted, or phrases like subjects contained, an anomalous phenomena, their official seals hinting at government involvement. Newspaper clippings reported the vanishing of an entire Kalimdor village. The cause attributed to disease but suspiciously vague. Photographs, blurry and haunting, showed figures that seemed more spectral than human, their forms flickering like bad film. The truth crystallized, cold and unyielding. Professor Hawthorne had uncovered something extraordinary, something dangerous, and it had marked her. Why had she kept this, And why leave it where I could find it? The answer hit like a thunderbolt. This wasn't carelessness. It was deliberate, a fail-safe. If something happened to her, the box ensured the truth would surface. As if on cue, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Put it back. Forget what you saw. For your safety. My blood ran cold, my eyes darting to the study's windows, where the streetlights cast long, menacing shadows. The street was empty, Havensport's quiet unbroken, but the message was a warning, a confirmation that I'd stumbled into something far bigger than myself. I should have heeded it, should have resealed the box and walked away. But the mystery was a siren's call, its implications too vast to ignore. If Hawthorne's findings were true, they could upend everything we knew about human potential, about reality itself. With shaking hands, I began photographing the box's contents. Notebooks, documents, photos. My phone's flash cutting through the study's gloom. I uploaded the images to a secure cloud drive, my fingers fumbling with passwords, ensuring a record would survive whatever came next. Who had sent that text? How did they know what I'd found? And where was Professor Hawthorne? Was her Paris trip a cover? A flight from danger? The jingle of keys in the hallway snapped me from my thoughts. Heavy footsteps pausing outside the study door. Panic surged, my heart a wild drumbeat as I shoved the contents back into the box, heedless of order. I'd just closed the flaps when the door swung open, revealing two men in dark suits, their faces grim, their eyes cold as steel. They weren't campus security, that much was clear. One stepped forward, his hand slipping inside his jacket. "Miss Marrow," he said, his voice clipped, professional. "We need you to come with us." I backed away, my mind racing. How did they know my name? What did they want? "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice unsteady. "I'm just here to water the plants." His expression didn't waver. "Please don't make this difficult. We have questions about your recent discoveries." I glanced at the window, the second story drop a risky but possible escape. The man sensed my intent, moving swiftly to block my path, his speed unnerving. "That would be unwise, Miss Marrow. We're not here to harm you. We just want to talk." But his eyes told a different story, a promise of silence at any cost. Whatever secrets the box held, these men were here to bury them, and me if necessary. In a surge of adrenaline, I grabbed the box and hurled it at them, the wood splintering as it struck the second man's chest. In their moment of surprise, I darted past, my sneakers pounding the hardwood as I raced down the stairs and out the front door, the night air sharp against my skin. I ran through Havensport's quiet streets, the shouts and footsteps of pursuit echoing behind me. Ducking into an alley, I pressed myself against a brick wall, my breath ragged, the box's weight a phantom in my hands. I'd lost it, but I had the photos, the knowledge, and a choice. Retreat to my old life. Pretend none of this had happened, or follow the trail Hawthorne had left, no matter the cost. Sirens wailed in the distance, and a black sedan cruised slowly past, its windows dark. I knew my decision. This was only the beginning, a plunge into a mystery that spanned decades and continents, a quest for truth that could change the world or destroy me. With a final glance at the townhouse where my ordinary life had ended, I slipped into the shadows, determined to see this through. For Hawthorne, for the truth, and for the secrets that refused to stay buried. The rhythmic thud of my sneakers against the gravel path was a steady pulse in the quiet of Shadowmere Park, the only sound piercing the stillness of the late-night air. Moonlight filtered through the ancient oaks, casting dappled shadows that danced across the trail, their shapes twisting like specters in the breeze. I, Nathan Holt, a 34-year-old software developer from Barnholt, had been running this route for years, a nightly ritual to clear my mind and keep the creeping, sedentary habits of my desk job at bay. Shadowmere, with its winding paths and secluded glades, was my sanctuary, even after budget cuts left its lamps unlit and its upkeep neglected, the overgrowth lending a wild edge to its charm. But tonight, as I rounded a bend near the park's old gazebo, a prickle of unease crawled up my spine, a whisper that I wasn't alone. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine. But there was something else, a faint, acrid tang, like ozone before a storm. I'd felt off from the moment I entered the park, a nagging sense of being watched, my skin prickling despite the sweat beading on my brow. I'd brushed it off as fatigue, too many late nights debugging code, but now, the crunch of gravel behind me, out of sync with my own steps, confirmed my fears. Someone was following me. My pulse quickened, my breath hitching as I picked up my pace, the path stretching into the shadowed heart of the park. The footsteps matched my rhythm, their cadence deliberate, gaining ground. I risked a glance over my shoulder, my heart lurching at the sight of a dark figure. About 50 yards back, their form shrouded in a hoodie, their face obscured by shadow. They moved with purpose, closing the gap with each stride. My mind raced, cataloging the park's layout. Shadowmere's main gate was still a mile off, but a side exit near the rose garden was closer, leading to Varnholt's well-lit downtown, alive with late-night cafes and bars. I veered off the main trail, cutting across a dew-slicked meadow, the grass treacherous underfoot, my sneakers slipping as I pushed harder. The pursuer followed, their footsteps louder now, no longer bothering with stealth, crashing through the underbrush like a hunter closing on prey. My lungs burned, my legs protesting, but fear drove me, the side exit's iron gate glinting in the moonlight. I sprinted toward it, hope flaring, only to crash against a new reality. The gate was chained shut, a shiny padlock mocking my escape. When had they locked it? The park's neglect had never extended to ceiling exits, and the realization tightened the knot in my stomach. The footsteps slowed behind me, deliberate, taunting. I spun around, back pressed against the cold metal, ready to face my hunter. The figure emerged from the shadows, and a jolt of recognition hit me. I'd seen him before, loitering near the park's entrance when I'd started my run. A man of average build, nondescript in jeans and a hoodie, but with eyes that had burned with an intensity that set me on edge. Now those eyes locked onto mine, glinting in the moonlight. "Whoa, easy," he said, his voice calm, almost soothing, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "I'm not here to hurt you. Nathan, I just need to talk." "Talk?" I panted, my chest heaving, my hands clenched into fists. "You chased me through a park at midnight to talk?" "I know it looks bad," he said, his tone earnest, "but I had to make sure you were alone. It's not safe here, not with what's been going on." I frowned, confusion warring with fear. "What are you talking about? What's going on?" He glanced around, his posture tense, as if expecting the shadows to move. "The vanishings," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. 4 people in the last 6 weeks, all last seen in Shadowmere or nearby. The police are keeping it hushed, but something's wrong here, something dangerous. The words landed like stones, stirring memories of whispered rumors. Co-workers mentioning missing joggers, a neighbor's cousin gone without a trace. I dismissed them as urban legends, Varnholt's version of ghost stories, but the man's urgency gave me pause. "How do you know this?" I asked, still wary, my back pressed against the gate's bars. "Because I saw it," he said, his eyes haunted. "The last one, a guy running, just like you. 1 second he was there, the next, gone, like the shadows swallowed him whole." A chill gripped me, unrelated to the night's cool air. His story was absurd, the stuff of late-night horror flicks, but there was a raw sincerity in his gaze. a desperation that made me hesitate. And hadn't I felt it too? The park's air heavier lately, shadows thicker as if they watched me run. Okay, I said slowly, my voice steadier than I felt. Let's say I believe you. What do we do? Relief flashed across his face, softening his intensity. We find the source. I've tracked it to the old groundskeeper's shed in the park center. Strange lights, weird sounds, it's all coming from there. Every instinct screamed to run, to sprint home and lock the door, to forget this man and his wild claims. But the thought of more vanishings, of families left wondering, anchored me. I couldn't walk away, not now. All right, I said, surprised by the resolve in my voice. Show me. He introduced himself as Riley, a former park maintenance worker laid off when the budget cuts hit. He'd stayed connected to Shadowmere, unable to let go of the place he'd tended for years, and his obsession had led him to this mystery. We set off, sticking to the shadows, moving silently through the park's overgrown trails. As we neared the center, I noticed details I'd overlooked. Strange carvings on tree trunks. Unlike any graffiti, their lines pulsing faintly. Patches of earth where nothing grew, the soil unnaturally barren. A low hum, just at the edge of hearing, vibrating in my bones. The groundskeeper's shed loomed ahead, a dilapidated structure swallowed by vines, its windows boarded but leaking a faint, unnatural light. Riley signaled for silence and we crept to a grimy window, peering inside. My breath caught at the sight. The shed's interior was transformed, its rusty tools replaced by pulsing machinery, their surfaces etched with symbols that hurt to look at. At the center, a swirling vortex of light hung in the air, a tear in reality itself, its edges shimmering with impossible colors. Shapes moved around it, forms that defied description, their outlines shifting, now humanoid, now something else, their presence a violation of the natural order. As I watched, one of the entities reached into the vortex, pulling out a figure, a woman, limp, unconscious or worse, her body dangling like a marionette. Horror surged, my mind reeling. This wasn't a hallucination, not a trick of the light. Riley's face was grim, his jaw tight. We have to stop this, he whispered, his voice urgent. Whatever they're doing, whoever they're taking, it can't go on. I nodded, fear threatening to choke me. How? We're just two guys against whatever those are. He reached into his jacket, producing a small, cobbled-together device, its wires and circuits exposed. EMP, he said. Should fry whatever's powering that portal. One shot, though. No do-overs. The plan was insane, a desperate throw against forces we couldn't comprehend. But the image of that woman, of others, lost to the vortex, spurred me on. We devised a quick strategy. Riley would create a diversion, drawing the entity's attention, while I sneaked in to plant the EMP near the machinery. Simple in theory, terrifying in execution. Everything happened in a blur. Riley kicked open the shed door, shouting and waving his arms, the entities turning, their forms rippling with what might have been surprise or rage. I darted inside, my hands shaking as I armed the EMP, the device's hum a faint counterpoint to the vortex's otherworldly drone. As I moved toward the central console, one of the entities spotted me, its shape twisting into something jagged, its scream a sound that vibrated in my core, shaking my resolve. It lunged impossibly fast, its form a blur of wrongness. I slammed the EMP onto the machinery and hit the trigger, praying it would work. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The world suspended in dread. Then chaos erupted. The machine sparked, spitting ozone, the air crackling with energy. The vortex shuddered, collapsing inward, pulling the entities toward it with a force that shook the shed. Their screeches filled the air, a cacophony of rage and dissolution, as they were sucked into the shrinking portal. Riley grabbed my arm, yanking me toward the door. We ran, the ground trembling beneath us, the shed engulfed in a blinding light that seared my eyes. I was sure the park would be swallowed, consumed by whatever we'd unleashed. Then abruptly it stopped. We sprawled on the grass, gasping, the shed a smoking ruin behind us, its machinery reduced to twisted metal. The vortex gone. The park was silent, the hum extinguished, the air heavy with the scent of charred wood and something metallic. In the days that followed, we tried to make sense of it. The police investigated the shed, finding only evidence of a fire, no trace of the machinery or the portal. The missing began to reappear, disoriented but unharmed, their memories blank, as if the park had spat them back into the world. Riley and I met in quiet corners of Varnholt's cafes, piecing together fragments of the truth, but some questions remained unanswered. What was the vortex? Who or what controlled it? Shadowmere Park returned to its quiet rhythm, but I knew it held secrets still. My nightly runs took on new meaning, each step a patrol, my eyes scanning for signs of the uncanny. I wasn't just exercising anymore. I was guarding, a sentinel against the unknown. Riley's EMP was a one-time weapon, but his resolve had ignited something in me, a readiness to face the strange, to stand against the shadows. The world I'd learned was far weirder, far more perilous than I'd imagined, and sometimes the line between reality and chaos was held by a coder out for a jog and a former groundskeeper with a homemade device. So if you're running late at night and feel eyes on you, trust that instinct. The shadows of Shadowmere Park are deep, and what lurks within might be more than a trick of the light. The night was a shroud of ink, pierced only by the faltering beams of our SUV's headlights as they battled the relentless downpour. Rain lashed the windshield, the wipers fighting a losing war against the deluge, their frantic squeaks swallowed by the storm's roar. Then with a violent pop, the world lurched. The SUV skidded across the slick asphalt of Wraithmore Highway, a desolate ribbon slicing through the barren plains of Elderglen. I, Marcus Tate, gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white as we veered onto the gravel shoulder, the vehicle shuddering to a halt. The engine coughed its last, leaving only the rain's relentless drumbeat and the ragged breathing of my family, my wife, Nora, in the passenger seat, and our daughter, Sophie, strapped in the back. "Everyone okay?" I asked, my voice tight, my eyes flicking to Nora. Her face was pale in the dashboard's dim glow, but she nodded, her hands clutching the armrest. Sophie, clutching her stuffed owl, gave a small, trembling nod, her wide eyes reflecting the storm outside. I stepped into the rain, the cold biting through my jacket, soaking me in seconds. The air was thick with the scent of wet dust and ozone, the silence unnerving. No crickets, no distant hum of traffic, just an oppressive void that pressed against my chest. I inspected the tire, its rubber torn to shreds, and dread settled in my gut. We were in the middle of nowhere, miles from the last outpost, a gas station in Dunmore, and who knew how far from the next. My phone confirmed the worst. No signal, its screen a mocking glow in the dark. The moon hung low, its light diffused by clouds, casting the plains in a ghostly pallor. "Looks like we're stuck," I said, sliding back into the driver's seat, water dripping from my hair onto the upholstery. "I'll change the tire, but we should wait for morning to find help." Nora's eyes darted to the blackness beyond the windows, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't like this, Marcus. This place feels wrong." I understood her unease. Wraithmore Highway was a forgotten vein, cutting through endless fields of scrub and rock, its isolation a palpable weight. I forced a reassuring smile, though it felt brittle. "It's just the storm. We've got water, granola bars, blankets. We'll hunker down and move at first light." I set to work on the tire, the jack's clank and the spare's heft grounding me in the chaos. The flashlight's beam carved a narrow path through the night, but beyond its reach, the plains stretched into oblivion, their shadows thick and unyielding. I was tightening the lug nuts when I saw them, twin pinpoints of light in the distance, cutting through the rain like predatory eyes. Headlights. Relief surged, a fleeting hope that another traveler meant aid, a tow truck or a phone. But as the lights drew closer, that hope curdled. They moved too slowly, too deliberately, and something was off. Their spacing too wide, their height too elevated for a car or pickup. The vehicle stopped about 50 yards behind us, its headlights blazing. A hulking silhouette just visible in the rearview mirror. A massive truck, its engine idling with a low, menacing growl. "Marcus," Nora whispered, her voice trembling. "What's happening?" "Probably someone checking on us," I said, striving for calm, though my pulse raced. "I'll see what they want." I stepped out, the rain stinging my face, and raised a hand in a tentative wave. "Hello, we could use some help if you've got a minute." My voice was swallowed by the storm, thin and frail against the wind's howl. No response came. No figure emerged. The headlights remained fixed, pinning me in their glare, unyielding and cold. Dread twisted into panic. I was about to retreat when I heard it. The creak of a door, followed by the crunch of boots on gravel, slow and measured. But the space between the headlights stayed empty, as if the driver had dissolved into the night. "Who's there?" I called, my voice cracking, my flashlight beam sweeping the void. The footsteps grew louder, closing in, yet no one appeared. The plains a canvas of shadow and rain. Terror seized me. I bolted back to the SUV, slamming the door, my hands shaking as I locked it. "We need to go. Now." "But the tire," Nora began, her eyes wide. "No time." I jammed the key into the ignition, praying the engine would cooperate. It sputtered, groaned, then roared to life. I threw the SUV into gear, the half-secured spare wobbling dangerously as we peeled away. In the rearview mirror, the truck's headlights swung around following us, their glare filling the cabin with a harsh, unrelenting light. "Dad, what's going on?" Sophie's voice was small, trembling from the back seat, her owl clutched tightly. "It's okay, sweetheart," I lied. My voice strained as I pushed the SUV to its limits. "Just a little game of chase." The truck gained, its massive form looming in the mirror, the rain-slicked highway a treacherous ribbon under our faltering tires. Suddenly, another set of headlights appeared ahead, identical to the first, blocking the road. A second truck, its silhouette mirroring the one behind us. My heart sank, my eyes scanning for an escape. To the left, a faint dirt track branched off, barely visible through the downpour, snaking into the plains. With no other choice, I wrenched the wheel, sending us jolting down the rutted path. The SUV bouncing violently, the spare tire threatening to give way. The trucks followed, their engines roaring over the uneven terrain, their headlights cutting through the rain like searchlights. The chase was a nightmare. The plains a desolate wasteland that offered no shelter, no hope. The dirt track ended abruptly at the edge of a sheer drop, a ravine yawning below, its depths lost in shadow. I slammed on the brakes, the SUV skidding to a stop inches from the edge, gravel spraying into the void. The trucks pulled up behind us, boxing us in, their headlights blinding, their engines a low growl that vibrated in my chest. "Marcus, what do we do?" Nora's voice was a whisper, her hand gripping mine, her nails digging into my skin. I had no answer, my mind a whirl of fear and futility. The truck's headlights snapped off, plunging us into darkness, the sudden silence deafening. Then the sound of doors opening, footsteps circling the SUV, deliberate and unhurried. "Lock the doors," I said, my voice hollow, knowing it was a futile gesture. Whatever was out there, locks wouldn't stop them. Shapes moved in the moonlight, humanoid but wrong. Their movements too fluid, too precise, like shadows given form. A tap on my window made me jump, my breath catching as I turned. A face, or the absence of one, peered in, smooth and featureless, like polished bone, with dark, empty sockets where eyes should have been. Nora stifled a scream, her hand clamping over her mouth, as similar figures pressed against every window, their eyeless gazes boring into us, their presence a violation of reality itself. One reached for the door handle, its fingers long and unnaturally jointed. I braced myself, ready to fight, to protect Nora and Sophie with whatever I had left. But the door didn't open. Instead, a high-pitched whine filled the SUV, a sound that seared my nerves, blurring my vision and tightening my chest. Nora and Sophie slumped in their seats, their breathing shallow, their faces slack. I fought the encroaching darkness, my hands clawing at the steering wheel, my vision swimming, but it was a losing battle. As my eyes closed, the last thing I saw was those blank, impassive faces, watching as we succumbed to an unseen force, their sockets swallowing the light. I woke with a start, sunlight streaming through the SUV's windows, the storm a distant memory. We were parked on the side of Wraithmore Highway, the spare tire properly secured, the planes bathed in the soft glow of morning. Nora stirred beside me, rubbing her eyes, while Sophie blinked in confusion, her owl still clutched tightly. What happened? Nora asked, her voice groggy, her brow furrowed. I'm not sure, I said, my throat dry, my mind grasping for clarity. Must have been exhausted, pulled over to rest. The words felt like a lie, hollow against the vivid memory of the night. The chase, the ravine, those faceless figures. It couldn't have been a dream, not with the clarity of their empty gazes, the weight of their presence. Yet here we were, unharmed, the highway stretching before us. No sign of trucks, no trace of a dirt track or a cliff. We drove on in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. The memory of the night a shadow we couldn't shake. As we passed a weathered sign for Dunmore, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a truck's headlights looming. The road was empty, the plains serene under a clear sky, but the unease lingered, a silent vow forming in my mind. No more night drives, no more remote highways. From now on, we'd stick to bustling interstates, to places where the light held sway. The experience had changed us, though we rarely spoke of it, the truth too vast, too unsettling to voice. Wraithmore Highway had shown us something beyond comprehension, something that had let us go for reasons we'd never know. But I knew deep in my bones that the night held watchers, entities that prowled the edges of our world, their motives as inscrutable as their forms. And as we drove toward the safety of civilization, I made a promise to myself. Whatever lurked on those lonely roads, we'd never tempt it again. For some things in the dark are all too real, and not all are content to simply watch.